If you want, you can add this kind of hold here, and then I'm just going against the shoulder joint, and then he's tapping because it's too much pain. Sure, this attack is probably not performed like this from this perfectly stand in real life. Maybe from some karate practitioner who's angry at you, he's going to attack you, but...
So I'm going to be just like an attacker on the street, and I'm going to punch towards the stomach. So, as you see one more time, when I'm punching you and you're reacting, might be that your first move was successful, but after that I was resisting because I realized that you're trying, of course, to react and you're not staying there as a victim. So a natural reaction of a human being when you're seeing that his opponent is reacting back is, of course, to resist to him, to change angle, to tighten the muscles, try to pull the hand, push the hand, do something, and not simply stay there. And that's what basically I see in many martial arts, traditional martial arts, that they assume that the person will simply stay in the move, and always we have to think about the reaction of the person in front of us. Now guys, pay attention. I'm simply standing with hands behind my back, what could be very realistic, and you don't know if I'm going to punch you here or if I'm actually having a knife. Okay, so one more thing that I'm noticing with the technique you just showed us from Aikido, that you're assuming I'm punching, even though on the street in a real life scenario you do not know, and we actually see that people that have been stabbed sometimes thought they're actually being punched. So you do not know if it's going to be a knife, and if you're going to try to do it with a knife, well, I could definitely change the angle. So one more time, let's try to do it with a knife. And from here, again, if I'm going to resist and I have my knife back, you are in serious trouble. Okay, let's see the Krav Maga move right now. You're gonna be with the hands behind your back. First, we're gonna do it fast and then we'll break it down. So, as you were able to see, Leo with hands behind his back, I have no idea if he's punching me or if he's stabbing me. And as you can see, the defense is going to be exactly the same, because under adrenaline, under pressure, in real life, you do not have the time to really analyze between a knife to a punch. Okay, so what we're doing in Krav Maga is simply a redirection and then wrapping. Okay, there is a Krav Maga technique that goes with an inside defense, which I personally less believe in, because an inside defense, first, as you can check, will be less instinctive and natural, because the body wants to get out the danger outside of your body. That's why outside defenses are more natural and instinctive. Second of all, if I'm going with a straight inside defense, as you can see, whoop, it can go down. So the inside defense is limited. That's right, it protects my face, but on the other hand, if you're gonna just go low, whoop, I'm in trouble. Even though I'm going to bend my body, whoop, even though I'm going to take my hips backward, you always have the opportunity to go below my hand. With the technique that we have going down, even if you're gonna go towards my throat, I can go down and using my body, chest, whoop, stomach, whoop, boom. We're not completely erasing the inside defenses from Krav Maga. They're going to be effective in some cases, but in the case of a punch or stab to the stomach, definitely 1, 2, very instinctive. This is the instinct of a human being. Whoa. And what we're teaching you is the muscle memory. What to do after is to wrap, make sure he's not going to be able to pull the knife. When you're pulling the knife, I'm a part of your hand, and then I'm going to go with my own attacks. And if needed, disarm the knife and move back. So the main difference, as we saw in this technique between Aikido to Krav Maga, is again that the Aikido the move with the body is less instinctive. We can see that a person, when you attack him, the first thing he's using is his hands and less his body motion. The body is much slower than the hands themselves. If you're going to attack me towards here, that's going to be my reaction. If you're going to attack me here, this is going to be a reaction. You guys can check at home. Simply attack your friend gently, and you're gonna see that he's reacting with his hands. A body move can be added, but we cannot count in real life scenarios about the body defense, as the body is much slower than the hands. First of all, and second of all, we're not counting on arm locked. If we do arm lock in Krav Maga, that's going to be after I daze the attacker, after I punch, and he's not 100% there. Thank you guys for joining our Krav Maga class. You guys can stay tuned and check out our Facebook and YouTube page and learn more Krav Maga tips and lessons. Thank you.
Welcome back to another great episode with our fitness and Krav Maga expert, Oren Malul.
Okay, our next scenario here. It's happening in a supermarket, and you can see here we got someone performing a guillotine move. Right, it's kind of a hold, preventing air from your windpipe, kind of a choke move. So he's trying to fight him, and boom, then they go onto the ground. So we're gonna try to learn what to do before we get to the ground. So here we have a scenario with a guillotine move. First concept I want to understand, I don't want just to leave my head in this angle. I want to turn my head as much as possible. So the pressure wouldn't be in my windpipe, more in my neck muscles. So when I'm turning, okay, less pressure, I can breathe, I can survive. Okay, this is our first concept. Second concept, I want to try with my hand, go on his thumb area and try to kind of release pressure. So at least I can breathe, I can function, I can do stuff. Okay, from here, whenever I have those two hands on his thumb area, boom, I'm going with one hand with a shoulder strike, boom, to kind of release the hold. 1, 2, continuing with an elbow, going up, boom, with a palm strike or a strike towards the throat. I can add a push kick if needed and right away. Now there are a couple of moves I can perform in the guillotine, but what's important to understand is really how to get air in order to function. Because if I have no air, I'm not able to function. So any technique you got and you don't have air, you're not going to be able to perform. Air is giving you the ability to concentrate and actually act. So one more time, let's do it from the other side. Okay, so we got it here, as we said. So I'm turning my head as much as possible. Now, of course, I'm here, turning my head as much as possible. Okay, putting my neck muscles instead of my windpipe. And here, pay attention, my shoulder is striking his grip with boom, boom. Then I can go with an elbow, boom, and get out of the hold. Most important concept, get the air with twisting the chin and bring those hands, in the guillotine move. Don't let her go that quick from it, Leo. Head first, second, release the pressure. Third, pay attention, strike with the shoulder and the hand together. Third, you're simply gonna go boom, elbow. Now you can go out of the hold, the guillotine, and perform a palm strike. Boom, with all the body, boom, strike, and then go out of the attack. So what we had today is learning how to get away from a guillotine lock. We learned about getting the angle, releasing the hold from the thumb, striking elbows, go out of the hold. Not an easy one to get out of, but definitely possible if you create yourself air. can survive, can react. Thank you guys. Adi, good job. Thank you guys for joining our Krav Maga class. You guys can stay tuned and check out our Facebook and YouTube page and learn more Krav Maga tips and lessons. Thank you.
English.
I'm Lidar Lazi coming to you live from Israel with all of the biggest headlines from across the region. It's 2 p.m. here in Israel and 7 a.m. in New York, and we are on day 16 of Operation Roaring Lion. And these are all the latest developments at this hour. Israel came under fresh missile and rocket fire overnight and throughout the day today with launches from both Iran and Lebanon. Sirens sounded across central Israel several times during the night and throughout the day. So far, after ballistic missiles were fired from Iran. And just before this broadcast, missiles sounded in central Israel with several small impact sites in Tel Aviv and other areas. The Israel Defense Forces say most of the missiles in the latest salvos were intercepted while others landed in open areas. Additional alerts were triggered early this morning after projectiles were launched towards southern Israel, while a rocket fired from Lebanon triggered sirens in central Israel and was also intercepted by air defenses. Over the weekend, Israel remained under intermittent missile and rocket fire from Iran and Hezbollah as the war enters its third week. Joining us now with the latest is ILTV's executive editor, Maayan Hoffman. She's joining us live from Jerusalem. Maayan, can you bring us up to date on the latest developments at this hour?
Sure, Lidar. Just before the broadcast, we actually had another impact site in Bnei Brak in one of our ultra-Orthodox towns. We know that at least 2 people were injured, one moderately, one lightly in that attack. It was actually a miracle because one of those the debris from one of the rockets actually fell on a preschool in the city. Of course, no students were learning there, so nobody was hurt in that incident. And this comes just after a morning of several impact sites. We had 5 impact sites this morning, as you mentioned, Tel Aviv and the surrounding areas. At least 3 people were lightly injured in those incidences. We're talking about men in their 60s and their 40s who were treated on the scene and then transferred to the hospital, according to Magen David Adom. And this was very lucky. In some of the videos our viewers are seeing now, we can see that not everybody ran to their shelters, and some of the people that were injured were actually injured because of the impact of the shrapnel falling down. Very, very important, as the Home Command has noted, to make sure you go to those shelters, because otherwise you can see there that you can get really injured. We also know about there was some damage done to the home that house likely damaged. And this was a event of just an incredible number of sirens across the country, from the north, as we know, from Lebanon, all the way down south, as far as a lot where a 12-year-old was injured in one of the rocket attacks there. We had a number of direct shrapnel hits. Those were in the Sharon, in the Sharon, Sheila, Sharon, Netanya, many injuries. So we did have some fires in
Maayan, we're having a little bit of trouble hearing you. I think your internet connection is not great from out in the field, so maybe you can go set up in another location and we'll come back to you as soon as you're ready. All right, we seem to have lost Mayan. So thank you, Mayan, for the update, and we'll be back with more from Mayan. Meanwhile, the Israel Defense Forces say its air campaign inside Iran is intensifying, with more than 200 targets struck in the past day alone. The military says Israeli Air Force jets hit dozens of ballistic missile launchers, including some that were armed and ready to fire towards Israel. Additional targets included air defense systems, missile launch sites, and weapons storage facilities. The IDF says many of the strikes were focused specifically on Iranian missile launchers in an effort to reduce the scale of attacks on Israeli territory. Israeli aircraft also targeted a facility linked to the intelligence branch Khatam al-Anbiya headquarters, which collects and analyzes intelligence for the Iranian regime. The military says the site was struck while several senior intelligence officials were present, though damage assessments are still underway. The strikes are part of Operation Roaring Lion, the large-scale campaign targeting Iran's missile and military capabilities. Meanwhile, Defense Minister Israel Katz made statements over the weekend. Let's listen to what he had to say.
גם חיל האוויר הישראלי ממשיך בגל תקיפות עוצמתי בטהרן ובכל איראן. איראן מפעילה טרור וסחטנות אזורית ועולמית כדי להרתיע את ישראל וארצות הברית מלהמשיך במערכה, ונענית בעוצמת פלדה חזקה ובלתי מתפשרת. אנחנו נכנסים לישורת ההכרעה במאבק בניסיונות המשטר לשרוד, תוך גרימת סבל הולך וגובר לעם האיראני לבין כניעה. רק העם האיראני יכול לשים לזה סוף במאבק נחוש עד להפלת משטר הטרור והצלת איראן.
All right. And the United States is also escalating its military campaign against Iran, striking targets on Kharg Island, the country's main oil export terminal, while vowing to keep open the Strait of Hormuz amid Iranian efforts to block and target shipping. U.S. President Donald Trump says American forces totally obliterated Iranian military targets on the island, which handles around 90% of Iran's oil exports. Trump said oil facilities were spared for now, but warned they could be targeted if Iran continues to threaten shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. Iran responded with a sharp warning. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps said any attack on Iran's energy infrastructure would trigger retaliatory strikes on regional energy facilities linked to the United States. The president also said multiple countries may send warships to help protect oil tankers, including China, France, Japan, South Korea, and the United Kingdom. Trump said the U.S. will ensure the strait is open, safe, and free one way or another, adding that the American forces could strike Iranian positions along the shoreline if shipping continues to be threatened. And speaking to reporters, U.S. President Trump had this to say about the war.
Are you speaking with Prime Minister Netanyahu, and are your objectives the same in terms of ending the war?
Well, I think they might be a little different, I guess. You know, they're a different country than we are. But he will tell you there's never been a power like the power of the United States. I built our military in my first term.
How long now do you think the war is likely to last?
I can't tell you that. I mean, I have my own idea, but what good does it do? It'll be as long as it's necessary. They've been decimated. Their country's in bad shape. The whole thing is collapsing.
And joining us now with more on Operation Roaring Lion on day 16 of the war is Brigadier General Amir Avivi, CEO and founder of the Israel Defense and Security Forum. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
So a lot of incredible accomplishments for the United States and Israel. What is your assessment now going into the third week of this war?
Well, obviously, Israel and the U.S. are controlling Iranian skies. There are tens of thousands of targets to deal with. Until now, we're talking about something like 16,000 targets that have been hit in Iran. The U.S. and Israel are systematically dismantling the Iranian regime and its capabilities, focusing a lot on destroying their ballistic missile capabilities, sinking their navy, and working very hard to take control of the Hormuz Strait in order to renew the trade of oil globally. It's a huge effort. It's not a simple one, and the U.S. is working very hard to secure the strait. We see Israeli forces attacking besieged positions and the Revolutionary Guards, and doing a very serious job in preparation for the day when the Iranian people will be called to go outside, and they need to be in the safest environment possible. And because Israel and the US are operating completely freely, obviously there is an interest to really hit all the targets. There are many, many targets ahead, mostly, by the way, the military industries of Iran. Iran has a huge, huge military industry spread all over Iran. It's many, many targets. We started hitting these targets with the US, but there is a lot to do. And I don't think Israel and the US are going to stop until they really dismantle everything, including, of course, the nuclear sites.
So a couple of points there. First I want to talk a little bit about President Trump's latest comments. He said something very interesting. He said that Israel and the United States have different objectives in this war. We just heard that statement. This is, the first time we've heard any kind of hint at potential sort of daylight between Washington and Jerusalem, or sort of differing objectives in this war. What do you make of this statement?
I don't know. I think both countries agree that there is a need to set conditions for a change of regime. When you look at it from the Israeli point of view, obviously, for us, ballistic missiles, drones, and the nuclear program is a direct danger. And we want to see all of this dismantled, including the industries. I believe that for the US, it's actually much, much more crucial to have a change of regime and move Iran from the Chinese, Russian, Iranian front to Iran being in alliance with the US. The US looks, globally. It looks also economically at the issue of the oil. The US wants to have all the oil that Iran trades back in the SWIFT system and traded in petrodollars. This is crucial for American economy. US is very focused on a Hormuz strain. So obviously, the US looks from a different perspective than Israel, but I think they share exactly the same goal. One is completely destroying Iranian capabilities. The other thing is setting the terms for a change of regime, and everybody understands that a change of regime can be done only if the Iranian people rise and do something about it, and the terms will be set for that.
Now, I do want to ask you what the status of the regime is today and what its capabilities are. I mean, you said there's still thousands of targets to hit. What is the status of the regime today?
I think there is a loss of control. We know that the units are operating, independently. There is no coherent chain of command. We see units that gave up and, fled away, and others that are still resolute and fighting. I'm not sure the Iranians really understand exactly what's happening to them. They are being hit simultaneously in so many places. I'm not sure they can follow everything. It will take a bit of time for them to really realize that they are simply losing completely all their capabilities. We see a decline of more than 90% in their ability to shoot ballistic missiles and 95% ability to shoot drones. Every single launcher that launches a ballistic missile is destroyed. They don't have endless amount, and the industries are being destroyed, so they cannot produce new ones. So maybe it will take a week to more to really degrade them to the extent where they simply cannot threaten anybody. It's a process. And the big story, I think, is Hormuz strains, because once the US controls the strains, and possibly also the island of Karj, basically there is no Iranian economy. It will be completely under siege. This is not sustainable for Iran, and therefore I think that when the president talked about unconditional surrender, it's definitely something that can be achieved.
And do you think it is likely that the United States will, in fact, be able to take over this island and to ensure the opening of the strait? Because so far it seems that despite all of these accomplishments, there is a bit of a struggle there over keeping the strait open. Trump now calling on other countries to join in. I mean, what do you make of this?
It's not easy because the Iranians have multiple capabilities to disrupt the ability to move through the strait. They have, drones and missiles that they shoot from land to sea, and landmines also, and miniature submarines. They have also small boats, explosive boats they can send. And to clear all of that, takes time and to really be able to secure. But America is working around the clock to really clean all these dangers and secure the strait in a way that they can open it. And meanwhile, Saudi Arabia is moving oil through the east-west pipe to the Red Sea. By the way, this oil can be transferred through Eilat to Qatar and from there to Ashkelon. Israel can really start being a corridor of energy that will move faster oil to Europe, and I hope they will start using our capabilities, our pipelines to do so.
Now, you mentioned Saudi Arabia, and I do want to talk a little bit as well about the Gulf states, because they are coming under continued fire from the Islamic regime, even though we heard just last week that they would no longer fire on what they called their brothers, and yet here we see them continuing to fire on the Emirates and on other Gulf countries. What is the status of the Gulf countries today, and how long can they keep this going? Because we're hearing conflicting reports that some are pressuring the United States to end this war because they simply cannot take any more of the bombing from Iran. I mean, what's your assessment of the Gulf states?
Yeah, so they're not used to this kind of warfare, and they're not necessarily as ready as we are. And the society is not strong as the Israeli society. So obviously they're having difficulties, but I think this reality only brings them closer to the U.S. and closer to the understanding that this regime must fall and we need to defeat them. So basically they are pretty much supportive of the operation the U.S. and Israel are conducting. They're also coming to Israel, with requests of help and wanting Israeli capabilities. This sets a very, very good term for peace agreements after this war. And I believe that once we defeat Iran and the axis, the Shia axis, there is a good chance that we'll see these countries normalizing relations with Israel and joining the Abraham Accords.
And I do want to ask you about a report that we've heard over the weekend saying that Israel is running out of, its ballistic missile shields for the Iron Dome and the like. Is there any truth to this report?
Not at all. Not at all. Israel has prepared for this war. And the scenario we are experiencing is the best scenario we could have imagined. We managed to suppress pretty fast most of the ballistic missile shooting. We were preparing for massive shooting of 20, 50 ballistic missiles each round. Now we see the Iran shooting, very few missiles every day. This is something definitely Israel can cope with. So we are ready and we are able to defend ourselves. And we will continue to suppress and destroy their capabilities until they pose no threat to Israel and to the region. When we're doing that together with the U.S. is also attacking fiercely with strategic bombers and other capabilities. They're also focused a lot on the ballistic missiles. So it's just a matter of time until we really suppress it to the extent that they cannot endanger us.
And I do want to talk to you as well about the possibility. I mean, we heard from President Trump. He said this war is going to continue for as long as is necessary. Now, both Israeli leaders and American leaders have refused to say whether they would put boots on the ground in Iran. Do you think that that is a possibility? There are reports that the United States is sending over 2,000 Marines to the region. They aren't saying that they're going to go into Iran, but just the fact that they're sending them here raises a lot of questions. Do you think that at the end of the day, Israel or the United States or both will have to send in boots on the ground to finish the job?
No, I don't see any invasion of Iran, on a massive scale, conquering areas. I can see the Marines maybe securing some shores or getting rid of, this, as I mentioned, explosive boats or miniature submarines or something that has to do with the Hormuz strains. I can see the Marines being, deployed in the area of Hormuz and maybe the island of Kharj. But the boots on the ground in Iran are the Iranian people. At the end of the day, Israel and the U.S. will create the terms for them to rise and take over their country. They will enjoy air power and help while they do so. But I don't see any scenario of massive amounts of soldiers invading Iran. I don't think this is a reality.
Speaking of, you mentioned the Iranian people. So the IDF, we know, has been degrading the internal suppression forces. They've been targeting their infrastructure, targeting some of the Basija militias. But there is a growing concern, or I would say, even if, you're listening to some of the rhetoric coming from Trump and even coming from Prime Minister Netanyahu, there's been a bit of a change in rhetoric that while before there seemed to be this real confidence that the people of Iran would bring down this regime, today it seems leaders are perhaps taking a little bit of a step back from that. They're not as confident about regime change. What do you make of this?
Well, I heard Prime Minister Netanyahu. I think it was very clear that, at the moment, both him and President Trump and Reza Pahlavi, they're asking Iran to stay in their homes. And there will be a moment when we'll feel that, that this is the right time to ask them to go to the streets. And from the very beginning, we don't know what will happen. This doesn't depend, on Israel, on the U.S., what the Iranian people will do. But I think there is a belief that they will do the right thing and they really take the opportunity to take over the country.
Now, do you see an end to this war, in sight? There's a lot of talk today about what the exit strategy is, if there is an exit strategy. I mean, in your opinion, do you see a clear exit strategy from this war?
First of all, I must tell you that when you plan wars and you conduct wars, there is no such thing as exit strategy. This is an invention of the media. In warfare, it doesn't exist. In warfare, you have war goals and you reach the goals of war. And the goals of war are really crystal clear. We are going to destroy every single capability Iran has. Their industries, military industries, the ballistic missiles, the nuclear sites, the drones, the Navy, everything that they have and poses a threat to Israel and the region will be destroyed. And also targeting the Basij forces and the Revolutionary Guards in a way that will set the terms for a change of regime. Once this is achieved, the U.S. is able, with its presence in the sea, to put a full siege on Iran in a way that in a very short time, Iran will not be able to function anymore as a country and with no economy. So basically, the exit is unconditional surrender of the Iranian regime and a change of regime. This is the kind of exit we are talking about.
And you believe that that is a clear a war goal that is attainable, that is achievable. And do you have any idea of a timeline to achieve these goals?
So I think that within 2-3 weeks, at the pace in which we are destroying their capabilities, basically almost every single capability this country has will be destroyed. And then at a certain point, there will be a call to the people to go out and take their country. I assume that the U.S. will put a siege, economical siege on Iran, both from the air and from the sea, in a way that will disable completely Iranian economy and ability to function. And in this scenario, I don't think this regime has a viability. So yes, I think this is an achievable goal. Once we dominate Iranian skies, once we dominate the sea, it's game over. This regime has no viability, and you can have two kinds of change of regime. One is a complete change of regime. This is what we want to see. But you might have also somebody who belongs to the regime who surrenders and says, okay, I'm going to agree to everything that you say. Just like in Venezuela. In Venezuela, they didn't really change the government. They just changed the leader. They put the deputy of Maduro in charge. It's still the same government, but now it's completely on the side of the U.S. This is not the best choice, but this might happen also. I don't see the U.S. agreeing to any reality where Iran stays a proxy of China and Russia and not moving to the American side and joining America.
And, we've spoken a lot about, obviously, the military and the strategic side of this war, and Israel and the United States clearly seem to be dominating on the military front, on the battlefield. But there is another war being waged, and that is the war of public opinion on this front. Now, here in Israel, we know that the vast majority of Israelis are for this war. They understand that it's an historic opportunity. They understand the existential threat that the regime poses to Israel. But in the United States, it's a little bit of a different picture, and we're seeing a lot of opposition to this war in the United States from the left and also from some on the right. Do you see any scenario where, public opinion in the United States might sway the president to halt this war prematurely? Is that a concern here among the Israeli defense establishment?
So obviously it's always a concern, but what I see is as the U.S. is winning and achieving its goals, there is a growing support for the war in the U.S. Among Republicans and also to a certain extent among Democrats. And I think that looking at it maybe from even a political point of view, both Netanyahu and Trump, they have elections in October, November. And I think that the way they look at it, they ask themselves not what people think now, what they will think prior to the elections. And if you reach elections after winning decisively against Iran and moving Iran to the side of the US and dismantling Hezbollah and then moving towards normalization and peace agreements in the region, this is the kind of result that both leaders want to see. This is the strategy that they are pushing. And obviously, if there is a unconditional surrender and following that peace agreements, I think that the level of support and appreciation for the success of this war will be huge, both in the US and Israel.
Absolutely, and we can certainly hope that will be the outcome. Brigadier General Emil Avivi, thank you so much for joining us and for your analysis today. It's always a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you very much.
And now I want to turn back to ILTV's executive editor, Maayan Hoffman. She's in Jerusalem. We opened with her at the start talking about the situation in Israel with incoming missiles. She had to change locations. So, Maayan, great to have you back with us. Now, I do want to just quickly recap, if you can bring us up to date on the latest developments, on the latest missile barrages that we've seen coming from Iran.
Surely, Dar. So what we saw even just a couple of hours ago, or in the last hour and a half, were some shrapnel that was falling in various parts of central Israel. We had some shrapnel fall in a preschool in the ultra-Orthodox city of Bnei Brak. We know that at least 2 people that were injured there. We're just getting in reports as Magen David Adom and others scour center Israel, where there were so many hits of shrapnel. finding more and more light to moderate injuries, people harmed by the blasts that take place. So, that came after a very difficult weekend here in Israel, where we had sirens wailing throughout the weekend, including here in Jerusalem. Here in Jerusalem, actually, where I was before that the reception was so bad, was actually in front of an and that had shot coming down. What I saw there was uncanny. The impact of this, it was a cluster bomb, which we'll talk about later, that hit onto the roof. It dropped one of these huge Jerusalem stones down to the ground, made craters in the sidewalks near it. It was really, for a small piece of shrapnel, quite extensive damage. The people are able to stay in the building; they were still there, but we've seen that throughout the weekend. We even had hits as far as a lot where a 12-year-old was injured over the weekend, and of course, sirens continue to sound to the north as Hezbollah continues to fight.
Now, you mentioned the cluster bombs. Is this the reason why we're seeing so much more damage in recent days? Because there is a sense that we're seeing a lot more sort of smaller hits from shrapnel, from submunitions. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, it's such a good question. And it's something that really the public needs to be aware of. In the beginning, we were getting the full ballistic missiles with these missile heads that are the size of even two-story buses, two-stack buses, these very large heads, and they cause extensive damage. But now Iran is sending more of these, what we call cluster bombs. These have a series of small bombs that are broken down in the high in the air and can drop, the shrapnel can drop as far as a 5-kilometer radius in all directions. And so what you're starting to see is more and more of these being dropped, and they're causing smaller damage, but more damage and more potential for injury. Even more so, the reason that the Home Front Command is saying that you must go to a shelter, because you're more likely, not even though it will be intercepted, the shrapnel will go farther. These tend to cause a lot of fires. The fires we saw over the weekend in Holon or in Shoham, these don't cause us, like in Jerusalem, they don't cause the building to collapse. They do cause the building to be damaged extensively. And the other thing that we're saying is that, they're starting to see is, of course, people that are driving. Just today, I was driving back from the center to Jerusalem when the sirens were going off. And there's nowhere necessarily when you're on the highway to be able to take shelter. So the Home Front Command has advised, especially against cluster bombs, that you should not go underneath the concrete bridges. Many people stop because they think, it's a concrete structure, they want to be safe, but actually they're advising not to do that. Some of them have older construction, and a hit by one of these pieces of shrapnel, one of the cluster bombs, could actually cause that bridge to fall on top of you. In addition, they're seeing a very large increase in traffic accidents as a result of these bombs. People are pulling over in a panic, stopping in the wrong places, and causing accidents. So you're asked to please try to find somewhere on the shoulder of the road to pull over safely. Go next to your car, put your hands over your head, and wait for the siren to finish.
And, speaking of the guidelines from Home Front Command, and also sort of the damages that we're seeing, we saw over the weekend a hit to a school, and you mentioned earlier a hit to a preschool. Of course, there were no children inside at the time. But, this doesn't sound incredibly encouraging in terms of returning to sort of a daily routine, children returning to school. What is the latest on that front? Because I do know that there are some schools that are supposed to open up tomorrow.
Correct. So the Home Front Command reevaluated the situation and has updated now areas that are considered yellow, areas that are considered safe or have had fewer rocket attacks, are going to be able to open their schools, providing that there are proper shelters inside. In those communities, they are in Sha'an, the Bekaa Valley, Yehuda and Shomron, the Dead Sea, the Gaza Slope, and the areas of the Negev. Those areas will be allowed to send children back to schools. They will also be able to go fully to work as long as there is a protected area, and gatherings are being increased. So if now you can have 50 people in a gathering in those particular areas inside, you can go up to 100 people together again in shelter. The rest of the country, no such luck, certainly in areas like the north and the center, where we're still seeing a tremendous amount of damage. Those schools not be recent talk about grades 11 and 12 potentially opening up sooner than later because of their recitation exams. However, younger students are not expected to go back to school this week. The Education Ministry actually shared some numbers. So they've been doing what they call schools for remote learning here. And the Education Ministry did say that around 67% of students are participating in those programs. They put out statistics numbers. About 16% aren't showing up at all, and some of them are unaccounted for. But around 90% of the schools function more even, despite the fact that kids can't be in classes. As you know, Lidar, we've done this before, and the school system has gotten used to from COVID through all the previous wars running these classes. But I'm sure you and I, as parents, can say that that's really a challenge for those kids to get on, to concentrate, and to do something. Also, everybody, I think, there is hoping that the situation will improve soon.
Absolutely. It's very difficult to concentrate on school when you've been awake all night from missile sirens. Maayan Hoffman, thank you so much for joining us and for the latest updates.
Thank you.
And moving on to the northern front, the IDF continued intensive airstrikes across Lebanon over the past day, targeting positions belonging to Hezbollah. The military says fighter jets hit rocket launchers, weapons depots, and command sites used by the Iran-backed group, part of an effort to reduce the threat to northern Israel. According to the IDF, some of the targets were launch sites prepared for immediate attacks on Israeli communities. IDF ground troops also stepped up operations over the weekend, reportedly killing dozens of Hezbollah operatives during targeted raids in southern Lebanon. The IDF says forces are clearing Hezbollah infrastructure, destroying weapons depots, a command center, and observation posts. Despite the heavy losses, Hezbollah is believed to still retain about 20% of its pre-war capabilities, including the ability to fire precision rockets towards central Israel and tens of thousands of short-range rockets towards northern communities. And so Israel is reportedly preparing for a major ground offensive in southern Lebanon, aimed at pushing Hezbollah away from the border and destroying its military infrastructure. U.S. and Israeli officials say the plan would see forces seize the area south of the Litani River in order to remove rocket launchers, weapons depots, and tunnel networks used by the Iranian-backed group. The report comes after Hezbollah fired more than 200 rockets towards northern Israel in a coordinated attack with Iran last week. A senior Israeli official said the operation could mirror the military campaign in Gaza, with the goal of dismantling Hezbollah's fighting infrastructures in the border villages. Meanwhile, the IDF chief has ordered a broad reinforcement of troops in the north. Reserve forces are also being mobilized as the IDF prepares for multiple offensive and defensive scenarios. And at the same time, Israel is said to have agreed not to target Beirut Hariri International Airport amid diplomatic contacts with Lebanon. And speaking of diplomacy, a new diplomatic push may soon bring direct talks between Israel and Lebanon. This, according to reports in Israeli media. The reports say negotiations could begin in the coming days, possibly in Paris or in Cyprus, as part of an international effort to end the fighting with Hezbollah. The diplomatic initiative, backed by France and the United States, could include formal Lebanese recognition of Israel. Under the reported plan, the Lebanese armed forces would deploy south of the Litani River and take responsibility for disarming Hezbollah in the border region. The talks are said to be led on the American side by Jared Kushner, son-in-law of U.S. President Donald Trump, and on the Israeli side, former Minister of Strategic Affairs Minister Ron Dermer has reportedly been tasked once again by Prime Minister Netanyahu to oversee the Lebanon front, and he would likely head the Israeli delegation if talks go ahead. Meanwhile, French President Emmanuel Macron has offered to host the negotiations in Paris after discussing the idea with Lebanese leaders. So joining us now with more on the Northern Front with the latest developments are Ambassador Avi Panzel, former Israeli ambassador to France, and Shadi Khalul from the Aramaic Galilee Research Center and the Israeli Christian Aramaic NGO, an expert on Lebanon. Thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, is Israel heading toward war, a ground invasion, or to a possible peace treaty with Lebanon? Shadi, let's start with you.
I would say both, because I wouldn't go for peace that is not feasible peace if we don't dismantle Hezbollah first. If we will go to peace without dismantling Hezbollah, means this peace would not be able to be implemented, and any signing peace agreement would not be efficient, and we will continue this cycle of wars again and again in the future. So any paper you sign in with Hezbollah still exist and have his arms and weapons and loyalty to Iranian regime without this Iranian regime fall, it's actually not relevant and we are just wasting time. And that's why I would go first in maybe dismantling Hezbollah, and I don't see any force that can dismantle Hezbollah. Neither the Lebanese government has the will to do so or the power to do so, neither anyone else who in the region. And the only ones who are affected by these terrorist organizations that could invaded Israel before, and actually today we see the consequences of their rockets and drones. Imagine they had a ground invasion opposite to the Galilee in October 8th when they started. We would be talking about different scenario. So now, in order not to repeat this experience and this danger to be actually positioned in our borders, we need to dismantle them first, to make sure they don't exist, and then we can maybe sign peace agreement with Lebanon.
And Ambassador, turning to you, Shadi made a very interesting point. The peace treaty would offer recognition of Israel. This is, a major temptation, but it would also force Lebanon to disarm Hezbollah and push it back to the Litani River. And now that second part sounds very familiar. It's exactly what was already expected of Lebanon in the previous ceasefire agreement. As Shadi said, the Lebanese army is unwilling or incapable of doing so. So what's changed and why should Israel agree to this now when it's clear that Lebanon cannot fulfill the second part of this agreement?
I completely agree with you that the Lebanese government and the Lebanese army are not capable of disarming the Hezbollah. They tried, or maybe not so hard, but somehow there were some attempts during the last 18 months on the part of the Lebanese government to disarm the Hezbollah, to pressure them. It was for no avail. And the Hezbollah is here, not strong as before, of course, not strong as it was at the beginning of the war 2.5 years ago, but still capable, as you see, of sending missiles to Israel. And I do not believe that the Lebanese army has the capacity to disarm them. First, they have to be weakened by the Israeli army. That's obvious to me. And this is why I believe a ground operation is possible in order to weaken them and push them back. And that does not mean that there are no positive points in the French plan. On the contrary, it's a very good plan. There's only one, the big question mark, the big unknown is the Hezbollah. All the other things are doable, and it's not the first time, by the way, if I may add a touch of history, that we are negotiating with the Lebanese government. After the first Lebanese war in 82, 83, there were negotiations, direct negotiation under American sponsorship between Israel and Lebanon. And we even reached an agreement for normalization of relations. And then came a veto from then Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad. So, in my view, negotiations are possible. The outcome, which would be the peace between the two countries and recognition of Israel by Lebanon, would be welcome. But the main stumbling block is the existence of a very strong Hezbollah, which has to be dealt with, I believe, immediately.
And Shadi, turning back to you, What is the situation inside of Lebanon now? I mean, how popular is Hezbollah today, and how popular would a peace agreement with Israel be?
Well, that's a good point and good question. Look, you need to understand, and people need to understand how this Lebanese system is actually. What does it contain? It contains different groups, different national, ethnic, religious identities that let's call them the Christians, which are the majority of them Maronites, would favor going with a peace treaty with Israel and full normalization. And I know they want that. The majority of them, let's say, want that. Among the Sunnis, I doubt that they would like to see it happening fully. There's a division because of the Palestinian issue, and they are actually siding Sunnis with Sunnis. And so it would be also some type of division there. Let's call it 50-50. And the other part is the Shia. And the Shia majority is not on behalf of the peace treaty. So any peace on this situation when we are not actually fully disarming Hezbollah would be a big mistake. And I believe actually that this Lebanese system is a failure system and need to be changed and should have a federal system instead, or a division of going back to what we call the Mutasarrifiyya, which was Mount Lebanon region as a state, and make peace with those who want to make peace with us, and let people of each area decide which way they want to go and what's their vision. I doubt that we can really, if we sign peace now, those Sunni, some part of the Sunni al-Jama'ah al-Islamiyya, they call themselves, and they have big support from the jihadi groups, and they're supporting Hamas. And I doubt that Shia will also not, when they see the damage in their villages in the south and in Dahye and in the Bekaa Valley, will actually not feel a revenge mood type, and they will in the future actually make this peace not reliable and not stable. So I think that we need to watch out what's happening and not really be speeding up to sign peace just for signing a peace and for recognition of the state of Lebanon to us as Israel. We don't need recognition from anyone. We are here to exist as Israelis. We exist, and let us sign a peace that is actually strong peace and normalization, first with those who want, and after disarming Hezbollah.
And Ambassador, turning to you, I do want to ask what France's role is in all of this. I mean, we continually see France injecting itself into Lebanese affairs, into Israeli affairs. Can you explain to us why that is and what France's role is here?
You know, this you would need not a diplomatic analysis, but a psychological analysis. I served many years in France, and always I came across of this very special feeling of the French for Lebanon, not for any other countries in the Middle East, not for Syria, not for Egypt, not for Kurd, for Lebanon. They still believe that they live in the 30s and 40s of the last century, when there was a French protectorate in Lebanon, when in Lebanon you had a majority of Christians, Maronite and Orthodox and others. Everybody spoke French then. I mean, the ruling class spoke French in Lebanon. They until today, they see it as some kind of extension of France. It's very hard to explain because the situation is completely different. Today in Lebanon, you have a majority which is Muslim, either Shia or Sunni. I think you have about 40% Shia, which is enormous. You have Druze also, which we did not mention until now. They don't speak French so much anymore. They speak more English. But the French, all the French, since I know France, all the French have a very special psychological relationship with Lebanon. And this is why you see the efforts of President Macron, who puts himself in the first line on this initiative. And again, it's not a bad initiative. There's only one caveat. You have the Hezbollah to deal with. And as your other interviewee said, there might not be enough support within other communities of the Lebanese social structure for peace. So it's very nice. It's very romantic, even I would say, from the part of France. I do not know how realistic it is. I say any future solution to the problem would have to be the disappearance of Hezbollah, at least as an armed organization. Lebanon can no longer exist with this kind of organization which threatens its own structure and I believe its capacity to work as an organized state.
Can I add something to that?
Yes, please. Go ahead, please.
Yes. It's a very good point that he spoke about, and I want to add on it as well. Imagine, we're talking about now only Hezbollah, and the peace plan is beautiful, huh? It's very beautiful and really good, beautiful dream. But imagine about, nobody speaking about the Palestinian refugee camps that host Hamas inside them, and those Hamas that nobody talking about disarming them now, and they will not maybe also disarm because the Palestinian issue for them is still going on. And those guys, after signing peace agreement, they will start firing rocks toward Israel because they want to stand and support their Hamas in Gaza or in the West Bank or for any other incident that happens here. So what type of peace we talking about? So in this case scenario, I want to just compare between Arab countries that we signed peace with, and it's a cold peace, like Egypt, like Jordan. Jordan is a kingdom, and Egypt is autocratic regime. They decide, the leadership decide, we go this way, and the people will, just shut up. They don't have a lot of power on the system and on the regime side. So the regime decide this is what we're gonna do, and we do it. And even if it's a cold peace. In Lebanon, the scenario is different. If the president of Lebanon, for example, wanted to sign peace agreement with Israel, the other Sunnis or Shia would say, we don't want this peace. And the president of Lebanon, because it's very fragile system and regime, he cannot force all Lebanese to imply or to comply with this peace. And we will have a problem again and again with these guys that refuse the authority of the president of Lebanon and will continue the war. So what type of peace we talking about? For having peace, we need to disarm all groups, include Hezbollah first, then all Palestinian refugee camps, and then ensuring that this Lebanese government has a Lebanese army that only this army carry weapons and arms that can enforce security in its citizens and has a powerful security forces. Otherwise, we will continue to see this in the north. So let's not make ourselves live in illusions and in dreams, beautiful dreams. Let's do the job. It's hard work we have to do, and then we will reach really peace afterward.
So thank you both for joining us today. As you said, Ambassador, it's the notion of peace and recognition of Israel. It's a very romantic dream, but as Shadi just pointed out, still a lot of work to be done, different reality on the ground. Thank you both for
Thank you
discussing this
very much.
dramatic
Thank you.
development.
Thank you.
And at this hour, to wrap up our 1 hour live broadcast, I want to bring in ILTV's editor-in-chief, Steve Leibovitz, to close out the hour. Steve, are you with us?
I'm with you, Lidar. I got more sleep than you, apparently.
So you did. Joining us from Jerusalem, I think from your bunker. How is the Israeli home front holding up in your view? We had a tough night last night in terms of sleep, I would say.
A lot of complaining from the mothers and fathers. I don't know what that's all about. Grandparents are having a lot easier time than the parents. Although I have to say, my sister, for example, is hosting about 6 of her kids and grandkids in her house. That's the situation all over the country. And I have this breaking news for you, Lidar. According to CNN, the Trump administration is saying this is going to go on for another 3 weeks, which is going to take us right through Passover, the Passover holiday, the Seder, the whole period. So your kids are going to be with you in the bunkers nightly and during school hours for the next weeks to come. That's my expectation, and they're holding up just great.
You know, it's interesting because we've heard so many conflicting reports about the timeline of this war. Many said it would be 2 weeks, but a lot of analysts said, and you know, it's going to last at least until Passover, if not longer. So it seems that that is the direction that we are heading in now. It seems that, you know, for the most part, Israelis are holding up okay, though I will say parents are expressing a lot of frustration over going back to Zooms, you know, like we did in the age of the coronavirus. A little bit of a frustration, but I think most people understand the significance and the importance, wouldn't you say?
Oh, yeah, we understand it, and people are sheltering. I go down to the Shuk, Machane Yehuda, the famous market in Jerusalem. It's a 5-minute walk from my house, and it's packed with people, maybe not as much as on a normal day. People are going out. They're shopping, they're doing their things. There's kind of a hidden economy of people, you know, going back to work as they can. And, you know, also people taking care of other people's kids, mostly grandparents. So, you know, people are functioning. And as you get into the 3rd week of it, people find more ways to function. But you can't let your guard down. As we saw today, even this morning, horrible scenes of a motorcyclist being almost, you know, being killed by one of these fragments that came down. And so we're vigilant. We realize it's still ongoing. We try to do what we can in the hours that we have in between the alerts. And we'll keep going as long as we have to. I don't see that there's much choice. We're very resilient. We've been here. We've done that. Not quite like this, but we'll keep on going.
Well, it's interesting. We spoke earlier with Maayan, who mentioned the cluster bombs, and that's something that we're seeing that's causing a lot more damage in the past couple of days. We saw some of the visuals on the screen just a moment ago. You know, I do want to mention a few points from what you said. First of all, we did see a number of deaths this round, and we do know that the majority of those deaths were from people, or injuries were from people who were not in bomb shelters, who did not necessarily adhere to the guidelines. Some were, yes, of course, the tragic event in Bet Shemesh, but most of the deaths were from people who did not follow home front command guidelines, and you know, they were maybe walking in the street. We saw some footage of people get hit from shrapnel from being outdoors. So that's one point, but yeah.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say that there's a solution coming, I believe, and that is that they're going to more closely pinpoint the areas that are actually on alert. Up until now, it's large areas of the country that are given the initial warning, and then a smaller amount of the country that's actually sent into shelters with the actual sirens that you hear. But the technology can be perfected even more so that it's only the actual area that will would get the impact that would have to shelter. I think we're moving toward that. The Home Front Command is promising that, and that could alleviate the situation somewhat.
And you have to wonder why they didn't do that from the beginning, because really, sometimes you get that alert, and I think our viewers have heard it online, that sort of, really sort of screeching sound alert that you just simply can't ignore, wakes you up in the middle of the night only to find out that there isn't necessarily a siren in your area.
These clusters, they spread out over a very wide area.
Yeah.
So, even if you hit the rocket with air defense, the cluster can go off and it can make an impact. They're trying to intercept them higher in the air. They're trying to, in effect, dissolve the rockets, so that there aren't large fragments. But it's very, very difficult work for our air defense. I mean, shooting down the rockets is the main task. And now there's all these fragments that are coming out. So Iran has been, working on their technology. We work on our technology. And then when the war comes, we see exactly how they fit together. We are in way, way, way better situation than the folks in Lebanon and Hezbollah. There is no early warning for the Iranian army. There is no warning for their people, in fact, when a strike is going to come near where they live and the civilians are being impacted. We're not targeting civilians, certainly.
Absolutely.
But the impact from all the damages. I think you're running out of time. I can see it on your face.
We are running out of time, and, it was great having you join us to wrap up this hour, and we really are almost out of time. So, Steve, thank you so much for joining us. I'm Lidar Lazi. Stay
Welcome back to Axis of Truth. Another week in the bomb shelter here in Israel as the war to take down the Islamic regime wages on. But is it enough? The American and Israeli military campaign is seeing stunning success, but it's not over yet, and there are key mistakes that can sabotage the whole operation. And now I'm going to explain what not to do to ruin this opportunity from the perspective of the West. As I mentioned, the military campaign so far has focused on eliminating key leadership, targeting IRGC bases, sabotaging the nuclear program, and more recently, targeting the IRGC's energy assets. Now, Israeli and American strikes have targeted command infrastructure and air defenses, as well as drone facilities, weapons depots, and key military complexes tied to the regime's regional operations, with over 3,000 sites already hit, according to CENTCOM, and over 7,000 IRGC and Iranian military casualties so far. But the campaign is now entering a second phase, with both countries stating it will last between 1 to 2 weeks for this phase. The focus now is shifting towards dismantling two pillars of the regime's power. First, the ballistic missile program, and second, the internal repression machinery that's run by the IRGC. Now, this matters because for decades, the Islamic Republic invested enormous resources into building the largest ballistic missile arsenal in the Middle East. These missiles were never meant to be purely defensive weapons. They were designed to threaten Israel, to threaten American forces across the region, and eventually to extend that threat even further into Europe and even the U.S. mainland through the development of ICBMs. But not so fast, mullahs. The facilities tied to that program are now being systematically targeted. Now, that includes major military complexes like Parchin, where it's long been associated with missile development and military research as well. At the same time, the campaigns also honing in on the regime's tools of internal repression. The IRGC isn't just a military force. It operates intelligence networks and paramilitary units, as well as surveillance systems that exist primarily to control the Iranian population. Now, these are the same structures that beat protesters in the streets, that arrest journalists and enforce the regime's social restrictions on women. Dismantling those institutions is critical. It's essential if the Iranian people are ever going to have the opportunity to determine their own future. But even when the military strategy is working, the political strategy can still go terribly wrong. And this week we saw 3 warning signs that show exactly how the West could still screw this up. The first issue is territorial integrity. Now, over the past few days, rumors have been circulating, suggesting that Kurdish forces from Iraq might attempt to enter western Iran, or that foreign powers might even encourage these separatist movements inside the country during the war. Let me be very, very clear about something. Dividing the territory of Iran is absolutely unacceptable to almost all Iranians. Even Iranians who despise the Islamic Republic overwhelmingly support territorial integrity of their country. This is not a regime position, it's a national identity position, which is why the regime has used this myth of Israel wanting to divide Iran for years to drum up fear amongst the people. If the West were perceived as trying to break Iran apart territorially, it would immediately unite many Iranians against both the United States and the State of Israel. Israelis and the Jewish community, just to understand how sensitive this issue is for Iranians, imagine for a second that someone was proposing Israel should give away Jerusalem as part of a political solution. That's how explosive the idea of partitioning Iran is for most Iranians. It's simply not negotiable. And that's why it's so important to hear Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu clearly say this week that Israel does not seek to divide Iran.
כי איננו מבקשים לחלק את איראן. אנחנו מבקשים לשחרר את איראן. לשחרר אותה מעול העריצות ולחיות עמה בשלום.
Now, that clarity matters. However, Israel does maintain strategic relationships with Kurdish groups in places like Iraq and Syria. Those relationships developed because Kurdish forces there have often been important partners against Islamist threats in those specific countries. But that is a far, far cry from supporting separatism inside Iran itself. Those are 2 completely different situations. Now, after the initial rumors broke, President Trump also addressed this issue and made it clear he had warned the Kurdish forces in Iraq not to enter the conflict, recognizing that such a move could destabilize the situation even further.
We're not looking to the Kurds going in. We're very friendly with the Kurds, as you know, but we don't want to make the war any more complex than it already is. No.
Rule that out?
We don't want, I have ruled it out. I don't want the Kurds going in.
The West needs to remember that if the goal here is to support the Iranian people against this regime and enable them to reclaim their country, the West can't be trying to dismantle the Iranian nation itself, nor even appear as if they're trying to either. Now, the second mistake the West must avoid right now is empowering or even amplifying these fake opposition groups. Now, for decades, Western governments and media outlets have repeatedly misidentified who actually represents the Iranian people, from regime lobbyists to the most notorious example, the Mujahideen, or MEK, which I exposed for what they really are just a few weeks ago on this show. Now, this group began as a strange mix of Marxist and Islamist ideology and was even listed as a foreign terror organization by the United States. They played a key role in the early revolutionary coalition that ultimately helped Ayatollah Khomeini come to power in 1979. Before later falling out with the regime. Now, today, the organization attempts to portray itself as a democratic alternative to the Islamic Republic, particularly through their front organization or organizations. In the U.S., it's NCRI, National Council of Resistance of Iran. But their ideology is anything but democratic. Inside Iran, the group has almost no legitimacy whatsoever and is despised by the public, in part because of its alliance with Saddam Hussein during the Iran-Iraq War. Despite this, the MEK has spent years cultivating Western politicians and lobbying networks. Their leader, Maryam Rajavi, frequently appears at conferences that are attended by former Western officials who love to portray the group as a viable future leadership for Iran. Except it's not. MEK even had the audacity this week to declare an imaginary government in exile. Government of whom? Because the Iranian people aren't with you, MEK. That's for sure. These groups claim to speak for Iranians while actively trying to divide the country and silence voices of actual Iranians inside of it. And unfortunately, some Western media outlets continue to amplify these fringe groups as if they have any real legitimacy. This week, the Financial Times ran a profile of MEK, and OAN also featured interviews with the group, presenting them, falsely, as the Iranian opposition. They are not. This is a problem that the West keeps repeating. The loudest voices in exile politics are often mistaken for the voices of the Iranian people themselves. Which brings us to the third mistake that the West absolutely must avoid: the so-called reformist solution. For years, Western governments convinced themselves that the Islamic Republic contained moderates who could gradually reform the system from within. But the truth is that the regime itself engineered this reformist narrative. The reformist label functions as a diplomatic tool. It allows the regime to present a softer face to Western audiences while at the same time maintaining an authoritarian structure that continues to operate inside Iran. We've seen this cycle many times before. Figures like Hassan Rouhani, Javad Zarif, and even the current president of the regime, Masoud Pezeshkian, are all marketed internationally as moderates. Western governments embrace them as evidence that the regime might in fact evolve. Yet throughout those years, the supreme leader retained ultimate authority over everything. The IRGC expanded its economic and military power, and repression inside Iran continued. And when you look at the record of many of these so-called reformists, the contradictions become obvious. Take Masoud Pezeshkian. In Western interviews, he's presented himself as someone who supports relaxing the mandatory hijab laws and even easing some social restrictions. But when he actually held authority inside the Iranian system, he enforced those exact same restrictions. During his time overseeing parts of the country's medical system, he himself imposed strict hijab requirements in hospitals and in medical institutions even before those policies were formally codified into law. In other words, when he had power, he did exactly what the regime hardliners would have done. He enforced the policies that he later claimed should be reformed. And this week provided another example. Pezeshkian publicly stated that the regime would stop firing missiles at Arab states in the region, and even apologized. But only hours later, Iranian forces launched missiles again towards Arab states, including attacks directed at Bahrain and the United Arab Emirates. That contradiction should tell you everything that you need to know about this reformist narrative. One set of statements for Western audiences, and another set of actions on the ground. Reformists function as a communications layer for the regime. They provide the talking points that Western politicians and journalists can point to as evidence that the Islamic Republic might someday change or be negotiating partners. But the core power structure of the regime remains untouched: the guardianship of the Islamic jurist, which is the overarching concept of the Islamic regime itself, that all power rests in the hands of the supreme religious leader, who just this week has been named as Ali Khamenei's son, Mojtaba. As long as the same system of repression continues inside the country under this structure, there will be no change in Iran, whether a reformist leads or not. In fact, placing a reformist as a figurehead probably makes it even more likely that the regime will survive. If the goal is to end the regime's ability to terrorize its own population and threaten the entire region, then the focus must remain on dismantling the structures that sustain the regime itself, particularly the IRGC, and of course, the broader security state. Ultimately, the future of Iran can only be decided by the Iranian people, not by President Trump or by anyone else, because one thing is already clear. Ignoring what those people are actually saying or attempting to impose artificial political solutions from outside will only prolong the conflict and increase the risk of internal chaos. The military campaign may be weakening the regime, but the political strategy that follows is what will determine whether that moment is actually going to lead to freedom or whether the West once again repeats the same mistakes it's made in Iran for decades. Now, while the Islamic regime is losing those missile sites and rapidly, as well as their leaders, something else has erupted across many Western cities and in Western media. a wave of manufactured outrage campaigns being branded to the public as anti-war protests. But when you actually look at who's organizing many of these demonstrations, who is funding them, and what message they're pushing, it becomes very clear that this isn't an organic peace movement concerned about the well-being of Iranians or Americans. It's a network of anti-American activist organizations and media figures who are running a parallel information campaign to shield the Islamic regime from any kind of accountability while trying to breed resentment against the United States and Israel. It's the exact same subversion narrative that we've seen promoted after October 7th against Israel, only now they're more explicitly turning it against the Iranian people and the United States itself. In New York City, for example, one of the main organizers of these protests has been the People's Forum. It's a socialist activist group that works closely with a network of organizations, including the Answer Coalition, NIAC, the mouthpiece of the Islamic regime which lobbies in Washington, D.C., Code Pink, and the Palestinian Youth Movement, which has ties to the PFLP, a terror group. Many of these groups have been at the center of most of the largest anti-Israel and anti-American demonstrations in the past few years, and they operate as a paid protest infrastructure that mobilizes demonstrations across multiple cities within hours of a geopolitical event. The concerning part is that many of these organizations are connected through a funding network linked to Neville Roy Singham, a tech billionaire based in Shanghai who has financed a web of radical left-wing media outlets and political organizations promoting anti-Western narratives. Now, Singham funds Code Pink, the Answer Coalition, the People's Forum, and God knows what else. Now, not only does he happen to be married to the co-founder of Code Pink, Jody Evans, but he also funds many media outlets with close ties to the Chinese Communist Party. He frequents CCP events in China, and multiple investigations into this network have raised serious questions about how these groups consistently amplify messaging aligned coincidentally with the geopolitical interests of the Chinese government. Must just be a coincidence, right? The hypocrisy of this movement becomes even more obvious when you look at what it's been silent about for many years. The Islamic Republic has been executing political prisoners, imprisoning journalists, and brutally crushing protests for decades. In the 1980s alone, more than 30,000 political prisoners were executed by the regime. In 2022, the IRGC poisoned hundreds of schoolgirls across the country in order to limit protests. And in January, the Islamic regime murdered approximately 36,000 more protesters, including hundreds of children, and many, many more are being tortured in prisons today. Where were the mass demonstrations in New York City demanding justice for those girls? Where were the rallies in London calling for an end to the regime responsible for that terror? But now that regime's military infrastructure is being targeted. Many of the same activists who spent years burning American flags and denouncing the United States as an imperial power and protesting on the streets against Israel have suddenly discovered a passionate concern for the safety of American soldiers. How convenient. What we're also seeing this week is that this same protest movement has a media equivalent because many of the same bogus talking points being shouted in the streets are now being repeated by commentators across both the left and the right. And the result is a remarkable convergence of disinformation and bad faith arguments that are being fed to the American public. It's the horseshoe theory in action. On the left, people like Cenk Uygur responded to the assassination of Khamenei by calling him courageous for standing up to Israel. Courageous? The supreme leader of a theocratic regime that jails women for their clothing and executes protesters is now being described as courageous by a self-described American progressive? How can someone be so obsessed with Jews that their brain is visibly rotting like this? But he isn't alone. His co-host, Temper Tantrum Anna Kasparian, was asked directly on Piers Morgan's program whether she would condemn Khamenei following Cenk's irresponsible comments. Take a look.
He called the Ayatollah courageous because he hadn't gone on his knees to Israel. Did you agree? I mean, do you think the Ayatollah Khamenei was a courageous man?
Well, he never capitulated to the Israelis, and we live under a government where, regardless of which party is in power, is on its knees on behalf of Israel.
So instead of doing so, she literally refused and started blabbering on about Israel and claiming that thousands of protesters being killed by the Islamic Republic is Zionist propaganda. But if you think this kind of commentary is limited to the left, think again. On the right, we have Qatar's darling Tucker Carlson, who spent the whole week pushing the claim that confronting the Islamic regime will somehow lead to thousands of American deaths, and more recently, claiming the bizarre claim that surrender by the Islamic Republic means condoning U.S. military raping Iranian women. Tucker's breakdown, of course, conveniently ignores the fact that this same regime has spent decades funding militias that have already killed American soldiers and have even participated in plots to assassinate American officials for 47 years and counting. But okay. Then there's Dave Smith, who appeared on Piers Morgan's program again and declared that the United States and Israel are the worst terrorist organizations in the world. Take a look.
The IDF is the worst terrorist organization in the region. Let's get real. The United States of America is arguably the worst terrorist organization in the world. If you want to look over the last 25 years, how many innocent civilians we've slaughtered. You're getting us into what the neocon. Yeah, that's right. You're getting us into the neocon seventh war, which they've been dying
That
for
American
the last
flag thing
25
behind
years.
you might want to take down, by the way.
No, actually, if you love this country, if you're a real patriot, you'd have to hate this government.
What's striking about that statement, and really all of Dave's deluded analysis of foreign policy, is that it requires completely erasing the historical record of how nations act. And yes, in this case, the Islamic Republic itself. Decades of missile attacks, proxy warfare, assassination plots, and attacks on American troops disappear from the story in favor of a narrative where the West is always the aggressor and authoritarian regimes are always the victims. Dave's assumptions rest on faulty premises that everyone, if given the chance, will act rationally, or as we perceive to be rational in the Western world. This is the dangerously naive Western mistake that we so frequently see from both the left and right. Dave's libertarian fantasy is rooted in luxury beliefs that don't apply outside of a society with strong institutions and the rule of law. Dave's puny little mind can't fathom that there are, in fact, bad actors in this world motivated by Islamist extremism, and therefore it must be the West's fault that they are the way they are. This is, as history has repeatedly shown, entirely inaccurate. When you step back and look at this entire landscape, the most striking thing is how indistinguishable the talking points have become. The far left and parts of the far right are now repeating nearly identical claims about this war. They focus obsessively on small incidents while ignoring the bigger strategic threat. They fearmonger about hypothetical American casualties, blaming Israel for a fight that's clearly America's, all while ignoring the fact that the regime they are defending has already spent decades exporting violence across the region and beyond. So while these protesters march through Western cities and these commentators argue on television and social media, it is worth remembering that one group of people whose voices are largely missing from these conversations, the Iranian people themselves. Because those people have been risking their lives for years to end this regime that these protest movements and commentators now seemed determined to protect. Well, moving on to the good, the bad, and the ugly stories of the week. Before we finish up, we're going to kick it off with the ugly. This week in Australia, we saw young women whose crime was refusing to sing a song for a regime that oppresses them. This week during the Women's Asian Cup in Australia, members of the Iranian women's national football team refused to sing the national anthem of the Islamic Republic before their match. Now, it was a quiet but powerful act of protest, but that was enough to trigger fury from the regime. Iranian state media immediately attacked the players, calling them wartime traitors and accusing them of disloyalty during a time of conflict. Now, commentators who are close to the regime demanded that the players be held accountable when they return home to Iran, and human rights activists and Iranian dissidents quickly warned that the team could face serious consequences and repercussions on an individual level if they're forced back to Iran. So following this debacle, reports also emerged that the players were being closely monitored during their time at the tournament by regime officials traveling with them, and even that their families back in Iran could face pressure or intimidation from authorities, something that the regime has a long history of doing. Meanwhile, Iranians in the diaspora have been raising the alarm about the team's safety and calling on Australia to offer protection to the players if they fear returning home. Now, so far, the Australian government has accepted the defections of 5 of the players, granting them asylum. But the pressure really mounted after President Trump got involved and called on Australia to help them ensure the entire team had the ability to stay. And if not, then the United States would accept them if Australia did not. Now, this development followed the disturbing footage of players saying help in sign language from the bus windows of the team bus. This was prompting protesters at the scene to stop the bus from leaving physically. But Australian authorities intervened and prevented the protesters from blocking the bus, allowing them to go back to their hotel. The tragic reality is if those girls are returned to Iran, they will absolutely face consequences. In fact, some of them are probably too scared to even defect right now due to the pressure on their families. Australia and all the international community cannot allow the Islamic regime to continue this long-standing persecution of its top athletes in this way. And our bad story of the week is something that would be absurd if it wasn't real. While Iranians around the world, even inside Iran, were celebrating the end of one of the most brutal dictators of the last half-century, small groups of activists in some Western cities were doing the exact opposite. They were holding public gatherings to mourn him. In the United Kingdom, a candlelight vigil for Ali Khamenei was held in Manchester, organized around the Islamic Center of Manchester, which is funded by the regime, of course, where around 100 people gathered to commemorate the dead supreme terrorist. Similar tributes were also reported in other parts of the UK, including some of the events connected to different mosques, as well as different student Islamic societies, with some university groups even posting messages calling Khamenei a martyr and urging followers to pray for him. Seriously. And it didn't stop there. In New York City, a small group of regime supporters gathered in Washington Square Park to hold a vigil honoring Khamenei. The gathering included a makeshift memorial with his photos and candles, and at least one speaker who praised his life and urged supporters to emulate him. Some of the participants at this same event even chanted "Death to America" and "Death to Israel." But I guess that's no surprise for that crowd. The good news is that in many of these cases, the events were massively outnumbered by Iranians who showed up to confront them, turning the ugly moment into a reminder that the Islamic Republic's propaganda does not speak for the Iranian people. But the fact that these vigils happened at all tells you something important. The Islamic Republic doesn't just export missiles and militias, it exports propaganda. And speaking of those courageous Iranians who showed up, our good story this week we end with today is exactly that. Because while a small group of regime supporters attempted to hold a mourning event for Ali Khamenei in London, they were quickly met by something they didn't expect. Iranians who were there to celebrate. Video from the scene showed members of the Iranian diaspora arriving at the gathering and completely overtaking it. What was supposed to be a somber memorial for the supreme leader of the Islamic regime quickly turned into something very, very different. Music started playing, people began chanting, some people were dancing in the street, and Iranian flags appeared everywhere, along with a few Israeli flags too. Take a look. So basically, what the regime supporters had hoped would be a moment of grief ultimately became a street party. And we saw something really similar this week here in Israel. In the middle of a war, with sirens sounding and missiles being fired, Israelis running into bomb shelters during Purim, a celebration. And what did Israelis do? what they do best. They turned the bomb shelter into a rave. People were dancing, singing, celebrating Purim underground while the sirens were still blaring. Check it out. When you put those two moments side by side, Iranians turning a regime memorial into a street party and Israelis turning a bomb shelter and a missile attack into a rave, you start to see something important. These are two societies that refuse to live in fear. The Islamic Republic built its entire system on intimidation, violence, and control. But the more it tries to terrify people, the more people find ways to laugh at it. And in the end, that may be the most powerful form of resistance there is. Well, that's it for this week. Of course, back next week with more stories and updates from across the region and updates about the war against the Islamic Republic. If you have a story, feel free to reach out on social media at Emily K. Schrader or Emily in Tel Aviv on Instagram. Until then, I'll see you next week on Axis of Truth on JNS.
As missiles rain down across Israel, reaching safety and managing daily life during war is far harder for people with disabilities. Now, during this war, mobility challenges leave some families living almost entirely inside their bomb shelters, unable to reach food, medicine, and essential care. For 35 years, Chimes Israel has helped children and adults with disabilities through therapy, essential care, and employment support. Because of this war, children with disabilities are losing critical therapies and adults are losing daily structure and human contact. Even some staff members' homes have been destroyed by attacks, yet they continue serving the people who depend on them. Chimes Israel needs your help during this war to deliver therapy, medicine, and food, and essentials directly to families' homes. It also needs to build a protected shelter for vulnerable preschoolers. In times like these, we are called to stand with the most vulnerable among us. Please, do not forget the children and adults with disabilities in Israel during this war. Your help could make a difference.
Welcome back to a special edition of ILTV's Weekly Review. Israel and the United States have begun operations inside of Iran in what is being dubbed Operation Roaring Lion. Developments are coming out every day, and we are here to keep you in the loop. Enjoy this special broadcast wrapping all of the top headlines from the past few days.
U.S. President Donald Trump is demanding Iran's unconditional surrender, saying there will be no negotiations or deals with Tehran unless it capitulates. Trump indicated that the war against the regime will end only once that country no longer has a functioning military or any remaining leadership in power. ILTV's Devo Klein has the latest.
In a social media post, Trump said any end to the war must begin with Iran's complete surrender and the selection of what he called great and acceptable leaders. He added that after such a move, the United States and its allies would help rebuild Iran and support its economic recovery.
And I'm once again calling on all members of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, the military and the police to lay down their arms. They're only going to be killed. And now is the time to stand up for the Iranian people and help take back your country.
This exchange comes as the United States and Israel continue airstrikes across Iran, while the country fires missiles and drones at Israel and targets across the region, raising fears the conflict could expand further in the days ahead. Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian quickly rejected the demand. In a televised address, he said calls for Iran's surrender were, quote, a dream they should take to their grave. The United States is reinforcing its military presence in the region as the war with Iran enters its second week. A third U.S. aircraft carrier, the USS George H.W. Bush, is now sailing toward the eastern Mediterranean with its strike group, including 3 guided missile destroyers.
The United States military, together with the wonderful Israeli partners, continues to totally demolish the enemy far ahead of schedule.
Trump rejected the notion of the Kurds entering the war.
We're not looking to the Kurds going in. We're very friendly with the Kurds, as you know, but we don't want to make the war any more complex than it already is.
Trump also said that the U.S. has no interest in any sort of deal.
The U.S. has a lot of negotiating leverage, maybe maximum, but we're not looking to settle. They'd like to settle. We're not looking to settle.
Ever since the death of Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei in the first days of the war, there has been much speculation about who will succeed him. Now that speculation is over. Let's cross to our correspondent Alec Pollard. Alec, after 37 years, Iran has chosen a new supreme leader. Is that correct?
Yes, Ivan. Iran's Assembly of Experts have named Mojtaba Khamenei, the son of slain Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, as Iran's next supreme leader. Iran state media reported the decision on Sunday following days of speculation over who would succeed the longtime leader after he was killed in the opening stage of the U.S. and Israeli strikes on Iran. Mojtaba Khamenei, a mid-ranking cleric, has long been seen by parts of Iran's ruling establishment as a possible successor to his father, despite the Islamic Republic's ideology historically rejecting hereditary succession. But Mojtaba enjoys strong support from the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps and the political establishment. The bigger question, though, is will he survive when both Israel and the U.S. have a target on his back? The IDF's Farsi account posted on X, the hand of the State of Israel will continue to pursue every successor and every person who seeks to appoint a successor. We warn all those who intend to participate in the successor selection meeting that we will not hesitate to target you either. This is a warning. Before Mojtaba's election, President Trump warned, quote, if he doesn't get approval from us, he's not going to last long. We want to make sure that we don't have to go back every 10 years. When you don't have a president like me, that's not going to do it. Now, as far as Mojtaba's chances of survival, Iranian media also reported that he has already been injured in this war, although we have no way of confirming that. In any case, he is unlikely to present any major departure from the ideology of his father, and thus the Islamic Republic under Mojtaba will probably present the same type of threat that it did before, and so he will not receive that approval of Trump that we mentioned earlier that is necessary to end this war.
Thank you, Alec. It's day 11 of the war with the Islamic Republic, and Israel has launched fresh strikes across the country, targeting military airfields, IRGC headquarters, and laboratories linked to the illicit nuclear program. ILTV's Steve Leibowitz has the report.
Waves of Israeli airstrikes on Iranian military targets are ongoing. The army announced that the latest IDF strikes hit laboratories linked to the Iranian nuclear project in the Tehran area. These laboratories had already been targeted during Operation Amkilavi and were again targeted by the IDF. In an earlier wave, the IDF Air Force struck 6 major Iranian military bases, destroying aircraft, including planes used by the IRGC Quds Force and Iranian attack helicopters. Runways and air defense systems were also hit, severely limiting Iran's ability to operate against Israeli aircraft. In still earlier waves, dozens of fighter jets dropped more than 170 bombs on targets in Tehran, Isfahan, and Shiraz. Targets included Quds Force headquarters, surface-to-air missile sites, and drone launch facilities used against Israel. The IDF says these airfields and facilities were key to arming and funding proxy groups across the region, including Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis. Israeli officials say more than 1,900 Iranian soldiers and commanders have been killed in Israeli strikes since the conflict began, with thousands more wounded. The military says operations are ongoing, deepening the blow to all levels of the Iranian regime. While visiting the National Health Command Center, Prime Minister Netanyahu said the time was approaching for the Iranian people to overthrow their government.
השאיפה שלנו להביא את העם האיראני לפרוק את עול העריצות, בסופו של דבר זה תלוי בו, אבל אין ספק שבפעולות שנעשו עד עכשיו אנחנו שוברים להם את העצמות. ועוד ידנו נטויה. אם נצליח יחד עם העם האיראני, אז אנחנו נביא לסיום פרמננטי, ובמידה שיש דברים כאלה בחיי אומות, אנחנו נביא לשינוי, וכבר מביאים לשינוי כביר מעמדה של ישראל.
Explosions continue to shake Beirut's southern suburbs as Israel intensifies strikes on Hezbollah. Close to 1 million Lebanese have fled their homes as Syrian leaders sound warnings about the escalating conflict. ILTV's Devo Klein has the latest.
The southern suburbs of Beirut, a known Hezbollah stronghold, remains under fire as Israel conducts airstrikes and limited ground operations in southern Lebanon against the Iran-backed terror group. The Lebanese and Syrian governments are now both demanding that Hezbollah disarm, but have yet to take decisive action. IDF spokesperson is again warning residents to evacuate beyond the Litani, signaling a larger ground operation could be imminent. Troops from the 401st Brigade operating under the 91st Division are carrying out security operations as part of Israel's forward defensive campaign. During one operation, Israeli forces located and destroyed a Hezbollah rocket launcher used against Israel, eliminating a militant involved in rocket fire. Defense Minister Israel Katz says Hezbollah's attacks on northern Israel create an opportunity for Israel to deliver a major blow. He stresses the campaign must end with greater security for northern communities. More than 1 million Lebanese have left their homes following Israeli evacuation warnings, including 650,000 from Beirut's southern suburbs and 500,000 from southern Lebanon. Katz warns Hezbollah may intensify rocket and drone attacks to divert Israeli attention from the ongoing war with Iran. Lebanese President Ayoun says the rocket fire from Lebanon were a trap, endangering both the country and its people, warning Hezbollah could turn Lebanon into a second Gaza. Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara announced his support for Lebanon's efforts to disarm Hezbollah, saying Syrian forces have been reinforced along the border to prevent the conflict from spilling into Syria and to block cross-border attacks.
Last night and again this afternoon, northern and central Israel came under missile barrages from Iran. New figures are now emerging about the scale of the attacks. According to reports, Iran has launched a total of around 300 missiles at Israel since the start of the war. Joining us now with more is our correspondent India Naftali, who is at the Magen David Adom Command Center in central Israel. India, what can you tell us about the latest attacks?
Well, last night, Israel had a restless night with a barrage of missiles coming from Iran towards northern and central Israel. However, I can report that there were no direct hits and there were no injuries reported from that missile barrage. However, there were some injuries reported from people rushing to shelters, which is actually quite a problem in the country because not everyone has bomb shelters. Only homes built after 1991 were under this regulation to have shelters. So it is a problem during this war. Now, after last night's barrage, there was a 9-hour lull where there were no attacks, no rockets, no missiles. And then again, about 2 hours ago, another barrage came. The IDF hasn't released details about that barrage. It's something they usually do not do for security reasons. They do not release too much information about barrages when they do happen. Now, Lidar, we do know, like you said, that 300 missiles have been launched towards Israel since the start of the war. About half of those actually are cluster bomb missiles, which are particularly problematic. For one, they're extremely difficult to intercept, but there's actually another reason why they're so problematic. Many of those bomblets, those sub-munitions that are released from the bomb, they don't explode and they can land on streets and cities. And unfortunately, if they're not cleaned up, someone could pick it up or a car could run over it and cause an explosion. So that's why they have to release bomb squads to clean up these bomblets after they've been released.
And India, I do want to ask... Yeah, I do want to ask a little bit about the future of these barrages. I mean, because we're seeing some patterns emerge. Are the attacks starting to slow down?
So what the IDF has noticed is that Iran seems to be struggling to launch coordinated large barrages. We're seeing now smaller numbers of missiles per barrage. But as of now, we're not sure how many missiles Iran has in its arsenal right now. We know at the beginning of the war, they had about 2,500 missiles. They've launched 300 to Israel. And the IDF has said that they've either disabled or destroyed 300 more of those.
So still a lot of work to be done in Iran. India Naftali, thank you so much for joining us and for the updates. And a cargo vessel was hit by an unknown projectile in the Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's busiest shipping lanes. Earlier, the United States destroyed Iranian mine-laying vessels near the strait as the U.S. struggles to keep the vital waterway open. ILTV's Kalev Ben-David has the latest developments.
As Iran continues its naval attacks in the Gulf, a cargo ship was struck near the Strait of Hormuz, north of Oman. The strike caused a fire on board. Authorities secured the area and removed the crew. This was the second reported attack on a cargo ship in the strait within hours. Officials have not confirmed who fired the projectile, but the attack came amid Iranian threats to keep the waterway closed as a war tactic to raise economic pressures on the region. Earlier, U.S. Central Command released video it says shows strikes on Iranian boats used to lay naval mines. According to the Pentagon, 16 such vessels were eliminated in operations near the strategic waterway. President Trump warned that if Iran has placed any mines in the strait, they must be removed immediately or Tehran will face military consequences.
The president and his energy team are closely watching the markets, speaking with industry leaders, and the U.S. military is drawing up additional options following the president's directive to continue keeping the Strait of Hormuz open.
The Strait of Hormuz is one of the world's most important energy routes, with about a fifth of global oil and liquefied natural gas shipments passing through the narrow channel between Iran and Oman. Since the start of the war, shipping through the strait has been severely disrupted. The vital oil transit route has been all but shut since vessels in the area were hit by Iranian strikes following U.S. and Israeli attacks on the Islamic Republic. The closure has been driving oil prices sharply higher and is putting new pressure on the world economy. Iranian Security Chief Ali Larijani warned in a post on X, the Strait of Hormuz will either be a strait of peace and prosperity for all or a strait of defeat and suffering for warmongers.
And joining us now with the latest on the war with Iran is Michael Pregent, senior Middle East analyst, former U.S. military intelligence officer, and former advisor to CENTCOM commanders. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Good morning from D.C.
So we're nearly 2 weeks into this war, and the United States and Israel have hit numerous targets, numerous senior Iranian officials. U.S. President Donald Trump has said, on the one hand, that the U.S. operation is far ahead of schedule, and he foresees an end to the war very soon. But on the other hand, here in Israel, the assessment is that there's much more work still to be done. I mean, do you share President Trump's assessment? What do you make of this dissonance?
I think what the president is trying to say that we are hitting our military objectives, the nuclear program, the ballistic missile program, the drone factories. We are succeeding from a military standpoint, but we're trying to create a window, an opportunity for the Iranian people to take back their government. And if the people don't move against the regime, at least show some sort of signs that they're going to do that, then the president can basically say that we've accomplished our military mission to degrade Iran's capabilities to threaten its neighbors, to build a nuclear weapon, to export terrorism, and to fund terrorism, and call it a successful, limited military campaign. Regime change has to have the face of the Iranian people on it. It can't be something we force them into.
Now, the Strait of Hormuz is a key strategic shipping strait. There's now an ongoing battle for controlling this as the Iranians are threatening essentially all the ships passing by. I mean, what can you tell us about this, and how will it affect sort of the continuing operations in the war moving forward?
Well, that's a new phase of this operation. So you're getting away from going after military targets on the ground in Iran and now having to defend international commerce shipping lane. And it's very difficult to do, but we can do it. The U.S. Navy can do it. We have those capabilities. The one thing that everybody's worried about are mines. But see, these mines can't be set to target a specific ship. They're indiscriminate. So if they go out there, that would put Chinese tankers at risk. It would put Russian tankers at risk. So there's a calculation that the regime has to make. Do we just send these mines out there where they can just blow up anything? Or do we threaten to do it and see what kind of concessions we can get? So that's what I think we're seeing right now. The Shahed drones cannot sink oil tankers. So if an oil tanker is actually struck and it sinks, it's going to be a different type of munition. A anti-ship missile maybe, or something with a higher payload. But the Shahed 136 drones cannot sink big ships.
And you mentioned as well earlier about regime change. Now, both the United States and Israel have sent mixed signals about regime change as sort of an aim of this war. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu directly addressed the Iranian people, saying soon their time will come to sort of rise up, topple this regime. But from a strategic or, a military aspect, I mean, how likely is it that this war will in fact succeed in bringing down the regime or really succeed in setting the stage for the Iranian people to rise up?
Well, we've decimated leadership, right? We've basically hit leaders going down to maybe the seventh, level of capable leaders. So that's the IRGC. And when it comes to the Assembly of Experts or the Guardian Council, we've decimated that, and we don't know whether Khomeini's son is alive. We know he's been severely injured, but this is the perfect candidate for the IRGC. They want somebody like him because he basically deferred to them on everything. And if he's laid up in a bed and can't actually communicate and doesn't know what's going on, that's the perfect supreme leader for the IRGC to continue these missions. Earlier in your report, you said a besieged headquarters was hit in the West. That's huge. It's the besieged that puts down the population when it rises up or when it protests. Besieged targets need to be center for any campaign, whether it's Israeli Air Force or U.S. Air Force. We've seen videos of besieged members saying there's nobody showing up, the regime is not in charge anymore, and I'm going to go home, meaning I'm a besieged member and I'm going to go home. So you're looking for things like that. We have to see signs on the ground in order to provide momentum, but we can't create that momentum. It needs to be, we degrade the regime. If you think it's weak enough, do something about it. And that's what I think everyone's looking for, the Iranian people to do something about it.
Now, we see that Israel is mainly focusing on the missile capabilities, which, of course, directly threaten the country, all the Middle Eastern countries, and, of course, the internal security apparatus. But I do want to ask about the nuclear program. What is the status of that today and of the enriched uranium that is supposedly, held or trapped underground?
Right. So that's one of the key things. When I was a former intelligence officer, when I came out of the intelligence community, I started working on the Iran deal portfolio. And I looked at the nuclear program and I looked at Annex B, which basically was all the concessions that the Obama administration was willing to give to Tehran. But one of the things I noticed was, disclosed sites and undisclosed sites. So if you say that the JCPOA only covered, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action only covered disclosed sites, that automatically means there are undisclosed sites. So that's what's being targeted by the IDF, by the Americans. We basically set their nuclear program back probably a decade, right? But it doesn't mean they can't reconstitute it faster if we don't pay attention to it, meaning they will prioritize putting air defense assets where these nuclear sites are, rebuilding them. And when we see those indicators, we have to hit them. We have to strike them. But the one good thing is Iran's now learning that Russian and Chinese air defense systems are no match for the U.S. Air Force or the Israeli Air Force. And that is something that I've heard in the Middle East. We buy 3 air defense systems so that we can make one work. We cannibalize the other 2 to make one work. That's how bad these systems are. And I think Iran knows it better than any country at this point.
Absolutely. Well, still more work to be done, of course. Michael Pregent, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Meanwhile, Gaza has been relatively quiet since the start of the war with Iran. Earlier today, the IDF struck a rocket launch site in the Saba area of northern Gaza. The site used by Hamas to fire rockets towards Israel was targeted because it violated the current ceasefire agreement. This comes against the backdrop of a fragile ceasefire in Gaza. Israel says it will respond to any attempts to resume hostilities. This after Hamas made several recent attempts to fire rockets from the Strip, which the IDF says constitute a breach of the truce. The IDF says forces under Southern Command remain deployed in the area and will continue operations to prevent rearmament by terrorist groups, neutralize threats, and protect the State of Israel and its citizens from any further attacks from Gaza or elsewhere.
And that is all we have for you for this edition of ILTV's Weekly Review. I hope all of our viewers are staying safe during this time, and we will see you again next week.
And as Israelis continue living with missile sirens during the ongoing war with Iran, many children are still coping with the trauma of October 7th and years of terror attacks. For more than 2 decades, the Shiloh Israel Children's Fund has been providing specialized therapy and support to help young victims heal. Joining us now is Chava Kleinman, Vice President of the organization, to share a little bit more. Chava, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So first of us, can you tell us how the Children's Fund was established? I mean, what led to the creation of this organization?
Sure. So about over 2 decades ago, the founder and president, David Rubin, was driving from Jerusalem to his home in Shiloh and was ambushed by terrorists on the road. And he and his 3-year-old son were shot. He was shot in the leg and his 3-year-old son was shot in the head. And miraculously, they survived the attack and they're okay today. But the trauma that he saw on his son and the other children around him made him decide that we needed to do something to help the children in Israel.
And, you know, since the October 7th attacks and now, of course, with the ongoing war with Iran and the missile sirens and, you know, sounding really throughout the day and throughout the night, how has the level of trauma amongst Israeli children, you know, how has that changed?
So we've seen an incredible increase in trauma amongst children all over Israel, because this is not something that's only affecting children in a certain place, but all over the country. And we see children that don't even have time to try to heal from the trauma, because what's happening now is that it's continuous trauma. And one of the things we know about trauma is that, you know, we try to heal trauma when there's a break in trauma, but that's not happening. So it's a completely different scene that we're seeing in children all over the country.
And can you maybe talk about some of the main projects or the therapeutic treatments that the Shiloh Israel Children's Fund provides, sort of to help children cope with these, you know, trauma, with these changes, and help sort of rebuild their sense of safety?
So because we're working with children, we need to work in very creative ways, right? You can't just sit down with a child and say, what's wrong? So we work with a number of trained therapists in very different creative therapies: music, drama, arts, small animal therapy, horseback riding therapy. So we do a lot of that kind of work. We also do group work with children in schools or in different centers or after-school activities. We try to get to whoever we can, and especially now, we have mobile therapy teams that are going out to people who can't make it to centers, whether it's evacuated families in the hotels or people who just can't leave their homes for whatever reason. So we work in those kind of ways, and also a lot of resilience programming, because also that's very important at this time.
And can you tell us a little bit about the resilience programming?
Sure. So, you know, something I always like to say is that, yes, Israelis are resilient and children are resilient, but if we don't give them the tools to help them and the support that they need, you know, they're human beings in the end. So we do a lot of, like I said, you know, group work or individual therapy, but also family therapy and also support for parents, because when you're working with children, you also need to help their parents.
Absolutely. And, you know, you spent many years working in other community roles before joining the organization. What led you to personally take on this mission?
I think over years of really working with families and children and dealing with trauma, I realized that if we don't help the future generation in not only emergency crisis healing, but long-term healing, resilience care, what is the future of our generation going to look like? What are our children going to look like? And that really just made me want to get involved and keep doing the important work that we're doing.
Well, it really is crucial and important work, especially during these times. Chava Kleinman, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And so to help our children overcome the trauma of war, you can scan the QR code on your screens or visit israelchildren.org now. At U Haifa International, academic excellence isn't just a standard, it's a way of life. With 21 English-taught master's programs, world-class faculty, and Israel's top national score in the Times Higher Education Impact Rankings, students grow in every direction.
If you really want to challenge yourself academically, grow in a very diverse community, and be immersed in such an important and significant environment, University of Haifa is the place for you.
Located on the stunning Carmel Ridge, the U Haifa blends academic excellence with a welcoming community.
U Haifa International has a great combination of top-notch academics with a great community of students.
Whether you're pursuing a one-year master's or diving into research, U Haifa gives you the tools, mentorship, and real-life insight to make your mark on the world. U Haifa International. Master your mind, live your Israel experience.
For more than 200 years, when Israel's most vulnerable needed help, Kol El Chabad was there. When families can't afford food, when seniors are alone, when children are struggling to survive, Kol El Chabad steps in with meals, essentials, and dignity. Right now, thousands of families across Israel are counting on that help, and you can make sure it reaches them. Your donation doesn't just give charity, it gives hope, it gives strength, it saves lives. Kol El Chabad, helping Israel one life at a time. Scan the QR code on your screen and give now. When you buy from Blessed by Israel, you're not just shopping, you're standing with the families of Israel's heartland. Every bottle of delicious olive oil, handcrafted necklace, or jar of honey carries the spirit of Judea and Samaria. These, along with many more products, are the tastes, scents, and stories of the Promised Land, made by people rebuilding our biblical homeland every day. Shop now at blessedbyisrael.com and use ILTV's special code BLESSISRAEL for 10% off on your first order.
Coming to you live from Israel with all the latest headlines from across the region. It's day 16 of Operation Roaring Lion, the war with Iran, and these are the latest developments. Israel came under fresh missile and rocket fire overnight and this morning with launches from both Iran and Lebanon. Sirens sounded across central Israel several times during the night after ballistic missiles were fired from Iran. The Israel Defense Forces say most of the missiles were intercepted while others landed in open areas. In Hulon, interception fragments sparked a fire and caused minor damage. Paramedics from Magen David Adom treated 2 elderly people at the scene and several others were treated for anxiety. Additional alerts were triggered early this morning after projectiles were launched toward southern Israel, while a rocket fired from Lebanon was also intercepted by air defenses. Over the weekend, Israel remained under intermittent missile and rocket fire from Iran and Hezbollah as the war enters its third week. In the south, an Iranian missile struck near Eilat, injuring a 12-year-old boy, now listed in moderate condition, while 2 other people were lightly hurt. At the same time, Hezbollah fired heavy rocket barrages from Lebanon. Meanwhile, the Israel Defense Forces say its air campaign inside Iran is intensifying, with more than 200 targets struck in the past day alone. The military says Israeli Air Force jets hit dozens of ballistic missile launchers, including some that were armed and ready to fire towards Israel. Additional targets included air defense systems, missile launch sites, and weapons storage facilities. The IDF says many of the strikes were focused specifically on Iranian missile launchers in an effort to reduce the scale of attacks on Israeli territory. Israeli aircraft also targeted a facility linked to the intelligence branch of Khatam al-Anbiya headquarters, which collects and analyzes intelligence for the Iranian regime. The military says the site was struck while several senior intelligence officials were present, though damage assessments are still underway. And over the weekend, Defense Minister Israel Katz addressed the ongoing campaign. Let's hear what he had to say.
גם חיל האוויר הישראלי ממשיך בגל תקיפות עוצמתי בטהרן ובכל איראן. איראן מפעילה טרור וסחטנות אזורית ועולמית כדי להרתיע את ישראל וארצות הברית מלהמשיך במערכה, ונענית בעוצמת פלדה חזקה ובלתי מתפשרת. אנחנו נכנסים לישורת ההכרעה במאבק בניסיונות המשטר לשרוד, תוך גרימת סבל הולך וגובר לעם האיראני לבין כניעה. רק העם האיראני יכול לשים לזה סוף במאבק נחוש עד להפלת משטר הטרור והצלת איראן.
And the United States is also escalating its military campaign against Iran, striking targets on Hagg Island, the country's main oil export terminal, while vowing to keep open the Strait of Hormuz amid Iranian efforts to block and target shipping. U.S. President Donald Trump says American forces totally obliterated Iranian military targets on the island, which handles around 90% of Iran's oil exports. Trump said oil facilities were spared for now, but warned they could be targeted if Iran continues to threaten shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. Iran responded with a sharp warning. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps said any attack on Iran's energy infrastructure would trigger retaliatory strikes on regional energy facilities linked to the United States. The president also said multiple countries may send warships to help protect oil tankers, including China, France, Japan, South Korea, and the United Kingdom. Trump said the U.S. will ensure the strait is open, safe, and free one way or the other, adding that American forces could strike Iranian positions along the shoreline if shipping continues to be threatened. Trump also made these comments to the press. Let's listen to what he had to say.
Are you speaking with Prime Minister Netanyahu? And are your objectives the same in terms of ending the war?
Well, I think they might be a little different, I guess. You know, they're a different country than we are. But he will tell you there's never been a power like the power of the United States. I built our military in my first term.
And that's the latest at this hour here from Israel on ILTV. Join us every hour on The Hour. I'm Ladar Lazi. Be well, and thank you so much for watching.
The US-Israel-Iran war may be spiraling into something much bigger. Trump won't rule out US troops. Israel is striking Iran's oil. Hezbollah threatens the north. The Houthis are watching. The question is no longer whether there's a war. It's this: is the entire region about to erupt? President Trump is not ruling out boots on the ground. Watch this.
Circumstances where you'd send in ground troops. How are you thinking about that?
I don't even want to talk about it now. I mean, that's, I don't think it's an appropriate question. You know, I'm not going to answer it. Could there be? Possibly, for very good reason. Have to be very good reason. And I would say if we ever did that, they would be so decimated that they wouldn't be able to fight at the ground level.
But I certainly will never take away military options on behalf of the President of the United States or the Commander-in-Chief, and he wisely does not do the same for himself. I know there's many leaders in the past who like to take options off of the table without having a full understanding of how things could develop. So again, it's not part of the current plan, but I'm not going to remove an option for the President that is on the table.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Quad. And we're still in war mode over here, so we're doing it remote. And I'm here in the studio in Jerusalem. My wonderful co-hosts, as ever, Emily Schrader, human rights activist and journalist, Shoshana Keats-Jaskell, co-founder of Chokhmat Nashim, Elevating Orthodox Women's Voices, and Rowan Osman, who is a Syrian, Lebanese, Middle East expert and activist who is currently in Israel. Okay, ladies, things are ramping up. Okay, the way that I see this, and people are going a bit crazy about this, is you would have to be really stupid to be the leader of a superpower and rule out boots on the ground, because you're basically then taking away the power of deterrence you are trying to put into your enemy in the middle of the war. Caroline Levitt also reiterated this, and people seem shocked. But wouldn't it be more shocking if if Trump took kind of the European tack that, oh, we're not doing this, and we're not doing that, and we're not doing this. And then where does that leave us, right, Emily?
I think this is just another example of the difference in strategies that we see. I mean, you put it exactly correctly when you compared it to what we're seeing or what we've seen from European leadership. It's just Trump is approaching this and knows how to strong arm them in a way I think is much more appropriate. So it's not so surprising at all, and it definitely you don't want to reveal your cards to your enemy. I mean, I think that should be obvious. I don't know why it's surprising. Trump says a lot of things.
Yeah.
We don't know why he says all the things that he says, but I know that a lot of them haven't happened. So, well, we'll have to see. We'll have to see what comes of this.
But also, I think it's part of this whole psychological warfare, isn't it, Shoshana?
Absolutely. I mean, if you don't know how crazy your neighbor is, you are not going to let your ball go on his side of the fence. You're not going to encroach upon him. Like, that's the whole point. It's called deterrence, right? And he tried for a long time to work it out with Iran without going and actually having hostilities. He built everything up, gave them a lot of time. It would be ridiculous of him to say, oh, my red line is boots on the ground, because all they would have to do is wait him out.
I know. And as we speak, of course, Israel is striking and the U.S. is striking major infrastructure. Yesterday, Israel hit the oil refineries. And of course, there's this huge talk about what's going to happen with the Kurds. Are they going to be the ground forces? Rowan, you have a lot of experience in this. You have been talking to the Kurds in Syria for a while. Tell us what your thinking is in terms of Kurdish forces being the boots on the ground that everybody's talking about.
So 3 weeks ago, I was in Erbil, Iraq, and I was surprised to listen to the Kurds who were upset seeing what's happening to their families in Syria. Nevertheless, they were preparing themselves to engage against Iranian forces, against Iranian intelligence agents in Iraq. And they told me that they think this is the moment where they could play a role, an instrumental role, to weaken the Iranian regime. And they were adamant and certain that the U.S. was going to intervene. And they were preparing themselves, not only in Iraq, but also in Syria and in Iran.
Yeah. Well, that we've seen the Kurds stepping up to the plate. We saw that happen in Syria. We've seen it happen everywhere. But Emily, I know that you're a little bit concerned that this will create some type of fragmentation within Iran. Is that a concern, or do we need everything dead right now?
Any invasion from any foreign entity is not going to be received well by the Iranians. Even the majority of Iranian Kurds don't want this. It would be catastrophic for the relations between Israel and the Iranian people. I mean, it would be a total betrayal. Territorial integrity is like non-negotiable for them. It would be hugely, hugely, hugely problematic. But the thing that's important to understand about the whole conversation with the Kurds is that everybody's denied it. For everybody, after it started to come up, even the Kurds denied it after the fact. The White House has denied it. Trump has said that he doesn't support that, and he's actually told them not to do something like that. It brings in a lot of sectarian interests that I don't think should be in the debate. If the Iranian Kurds, which many of them actually are armed, if the Iranian Kurds want to fight against the regime, then by all means they should. They should build a coalition with the Balochis and the Azeris and all the other groups of Iranians, all the other communities in the country some of them are working to mobilize that way. But to frame it as a Kurdish issue specifically, that's never going to fly with Iranians. Never. Right. There will be a lot of pushback in a way that ultimately blows back at the U.S. and Israel.
Yeah.
Even if we're not involved.
Well, they always blame us. It doesn't matter if we're involved or not. The other interesting thing when we're talking about who's going to be on the ground is maybe a surprising, maybe a disappointment statement by Trump regarding the future leadership of Iran. Watch this.
Most of the people we had in mind are dead. So, we had some in mind from that group that is dead. And now we have another group. They may be dead also, based on reports. So I guess you have a third wave coming in.
Reza Pahlavi, is he an option at all in your mind?
I guess he is. Some people like him, and we haven't been thinking about too much about that. it would seem to me that somebody from within maybe would be more appropriate. I've said that. He looks like a very nice person, but it would seem to me that somebody that's there, that's currently popular, if there's such a person. But we have people like that. We have people that were more moderate. You know, these were radical lunatics.
Now, I feel like we've seen this before with the whole Venezuela thing, right? So you've got Maria Machado, who won the Nobel Peace Prize, is friendly with Trump. She was seen widely in the world as the main Venezuelan opposition leader. But then Trump says, you know what, she doesn't have the backing. She doesn't have the people behind her. Maybe he's right. Maybe he knows something we don't. I've got friends in Venezuela who tell me that, in fact, Trump is right. And now it seems that he's not embracing the leader that the Iranian people in the diaspora, and it seems also on the ground, want, which is Reza Pahlavi, who himself has very modestly said he's only going to be a transitional leader. He's only there to help the transition, and then people can elect for themselves. Is Trump being unfair here? Do you think that there's somebody else in place? Do you think he wants the new supreme leader to be his puppet? I'm very confused as to where the Americans see the day after in Iran. Rowan, do you have any insights for us on this?
I definitely don't. Nobody knows what Trump is thinking and what kind of intelligence he's basing his statements on. However, I understand that if he endorses Pahlavi, we will see more resistance, even global resistance, because I met Iranians around the world who adore Pahlavi, and of course, he is a potential leader, but many are opposed to him. Even our friend, the brilliant activist Masih Alinejad, is not fond of Pahlavi because there are those who remember the history of his father in Iran. What will come next, I don't know, but it certainly won't be Khamenei's son.
Well, let's hope.
Well, Masih Alinejad praised him just a few days ago. She's been back and forth about him. She was also in a coalition with him before it dissolved under Women Life Freedom. So there's a long history going back and forth with those two. Also, Hamid Ismaili. But yeah.
No, I think that a lot of people, look, the monarchy is not what they want to go back to, but I think a lot of people recognize that if this is the one unifying leader at this very pivotal moment, then this is the leader that they have to get behind. I've had a lot of conversations with Iranians who are also not fans. They're not fans of the entourage of Pahlavi. But at the end of the day, I said to him, look, this is the moment. Like with Israel before 1948, there was a lot of division in the Zionist leadership movement. But at the end of the day, they had to get behind one leader in order to make it happen. That's what I keep telling them.
That's a really important point. And I feel like, you know, I'm just sitting here in Israel, just taking care of what I can take care of, but I am online all the time. And the disinformation or the different information, I mean, for me, watching these videos of like Tel Aviv in cinders, like it's like Pompeii, like 2026, Tel Aviv, or like the rats are fleeing. And I'm like, you know, you take a step back for a second, because sometimes you just want to answer them. And I'm like, blah, 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 blah. Why am I giving into this? And you realize this is part of the chaos campaign, right? They want to inundate you with falsehood. They don't care whether you believe it or not, but they know what it does to your brain psychologically. You just turn off and you don't trust anything. And you believe then someone who's like calm, making sense. I feel like we all need to kind of step back a second and like, what we're hearing, what we're seeing from where we are is, I don't want to even gander a percentage, maybe 50% accurate. And so I'm just like, I feel like sometimes people at home want to know, well, what can I do, right? What can I do? Take care of your family, your space, your people, make sure they're okay, and just do what you can do to support those voices coming out of Iran who are you know, people that you've seen for a long time, not like these new bots that come out of nowhere, because there's a lot online of disinformation, a lot.
You can see identical messaging, like literally identical messaging. Tel Aviv is burning. They don't want you to see it. And they have a video from, I don't know, Afghanistan from 5 years ago. I mean, it's ridiculous. And with all that misinformation is a whole set of new misinformation that we're attacking Lebanon because we just apparently felt like it. Not because Hezbollah started attacking us. And honestly, I don't know whether you guys saw Michael Oren, Ambassador Michael Oren, in an interview in CNN, where he basically called them out and said, you just had a whole report about Israel attacking Lebanon and you didn't put it in the context that they'd been attacking us. Now, we have our own expert here with us. Rowan, you are Syrian Lebanese. You have family in Beirut. What are they telling you? And are they finally rejecting Hezbollah? What's going on there?
A lot of people are opposed to what Hezbollah is doing. Even those who believe in Hezbollah's goals, ideology, those who hate Israel, are asking, what is your strategic gain? You've obviously shown the world that you are incapable of defeating Israel, and that must be the understatement of the century. They are a joke. So they've been urged since October 8, 2023, to refrain from provoking Israel. And for 11 months, due to European Western naivety that urged restraint, that thought that diplomacy is going to change the hearts and minds of the leaders of the axis of resistance, that allowed Hezbollah to continue sending rockets into Israel, which brought a devastating war on an already weakened and suffering Lebanon. They stopped after the ceasefire. Now, the world was urging Hezbollah to please stay out of this war. You're not capable of helping Iran. And Ali Khamenei is up in smoke. You cannot influence this war. And still, millions of Lebanese are displaced. The IDF instructed the evacuation of the entirety of southern Lebanon. So the Lebanese, even those who are Shia, who used to support Hezbollah, are wondering, what is your plan? Because Khamenei said repeatedly after October 7 that no matter what the consequences will be in Lebanon, they will replace it, they will rebuild, etc. We've seen nothing of that happen. Nothing. So people are very angry and disappointed.
Well, Hezbollah got $1 billion since in the last year by the Islamic Republic, who maybe now is in no position to be sending more money. But one more question, Ron. What about Yosef Aoun? Does anybody believe that he's actually serious when he announces criminalizing Hezbollah and he's going to take control back of his country? Does anybody think he's serious and be capable of doing this?
People are wondering. They are skeptical. However, they know that a confrontation must be avoided in Lebanon. Hezbollah are ideologues. They're nasty. They're not like Hamas. Had they invaded the north, God forbid, they would have never stopped to steal or to rape anybody. They are truly into their vision, their apocalyptic project. So they are trying to avoid a confrontation, but also because they know they're not strong enough. Even the Lebanese army is not strong enough. The Lebanese army's chief recently in the USA, what an embarrassing moment, told Senator Lindsey Graham that Hezbollah is not considered a terrorist organization in Lebanon.
Oh, God.
Which ended the meeting immediately. People are feeling skeptical, even in Lebanon. However, they believe that he has a true intention to disarm Hezbollah. Is he capable? That is the big question. At the same time, they are seeing at least tens of thousands of Lebanese sleeping on the street, and the Lebanese government is not capable of helping them. There are serious steps being introduced, historical steps that happened in the past 2 weeks in Lebanon. We'll talk more about it. It's never happened that on a Lebanese checkpoint, Hezbollah members were arrested.
Wow.
But can the army force them to disarm? That can only happen with the help of the Americans, and the Lebanese are open for that. But when the chief of your army refuses to admit that they are a terror organization, then the intentions, the motivations, and the abilities are in question.
Absolutely. But the question really is, if the Islamic Republic is on its way out, Emily, does Hezbollah continue to be a strategic threat to Israel?
Well, definitely not in the same way. I mean, you're taking out the sponsor of, well, not just Hezbollah, but most of these terror organizations in the Middle East. It would be a total game changer in the big picture for their region. But I mean, they would continue to exist for a while, and I think then we would have to look forward at who the next challenge is in terms of sponsorship for these terror organizations, because we know that someone else will pop up, some other group eventually will pop up. But in terms of Hezbollah specifically, I mean, hard to say. Initially, they still have a lot of power. They have a lot of weapons.
Exactly.
But we'll have to deal with that as the next challenge. But trust me, that's a challenge I'd be happy to have.
Exactly. Because if the Islamic Republic is not there, it's a challenge I think we could go. And I mean, Shoshana, I think that this is, in a way, Israel's opportunity. You know, the minute they started firing, it gave us an opening to finish the job that we didn't finish properly last year because we were busy fighting on so many fronts.
I personally have issue, like, I don't understand. I'm just being, it is supposed to like admit that out loud. I don't understand the motivation of Hezbollah seeing what's happening to the Iranian regime. What I know jihad, okay. Somebody else has to be pulling some strings. If your papa, your sugar daddy is going down over here, what makes you think that's not going to happen to you? I don't know. I feel like there's someone behind even the Iranian regime. I feel like maybe like a Robert Klein is pulling some strings.
They didn't have a choice. Maybe the Iranians are like, the Islamic Republic are like, listen, we've given you $30 billion over the last 20, 30 years. Time to, time to pony up. This is exactly what we funded you for. I mean, I think they were between a rock and a hard place, but now they've really doubled down. That's my fear, that at the beginning it was almost like symbolic rockets just to show that we're like doing daddy's job. And now they seem to be doubling down. Rowan, did you imagine this would happen? Or you're like, yeah, obviously it was going to happen?
Of course, it's going to happen. This is what a Western mind doesn't understand. They are willing to die for what they believe. They would rather die in an honorable way with their dignity, standing strong, and they would never ever surrender. Who on earth believed, other than the Westerners, that they're going to voluntarily give their arms back to the Lebanese forces? Not in a million years. They would rather die, all of them, till the last person, with their kids, and they would never surrender.
Yeah, well, so we have the same issue with Hamas in Gaza. Whoever thought that they were just going to hand over willingly their arms?
They'd rather die as martyrs, right?
They'd rather die as martyrs. And I think that's probably, you've hit the nail on the head here, that people in the West don't really understand what you're dealing with. You're dealing with an apocalyptic death cult that would rather go down with the ship and have the ship go down. And I guess that's our fear. Isn't that our fear for Iran, Emily? That we keep attacking the military infrastructure. We're going to keep attacking. We're going to keep dismantling what we can. But look, they'll bring down people with them. What are we looking at here?
Well, I mean, of course, it's like a wounded animal, a wounded wild animal. It will lash out with whatever they have. We know already, I was just reading last night, we know already that they've been plotting terror attacks against Israelis abroad. They're very, very hungry for any kind of win. In the past, when they've been in a position like this with the heavy international pressure or pressure to attack the United States, what they perceive as after the assassination of Soleimani, that was when they shot down the PS-752, the commercial airliner that was full of their own civilians and absolutely zero American citizens. They did this in order to frame the United States, or that was their intent. And then it actually, because there was documentation of it and other people found out, so then they ended up having to confess that it was indeed them. But my point is that they'll do just about anything, including false flag attacks, in order to stay in power. We know that they have planned for multiple contingencies, which is a huge problem. We know that the new supreme leader, Mojtaba, is significantly worse and more cruel than his father. He's involved with the suppression of the protest movement in 2009, also a very brutal crackdown. And he is just as, if not even more hardline than his father was. So it's not looking good in terms of the leadership. But then you also have Larijani behind the scenes, who is pulling the strings with the IRGC. So all of that needs to be dealt with for this to actually be successful.
I was so encouraged by the first week on how much we managed to achieve in the first week. Were we lulled into a false sense of security that this could be done with in a few weeks, Shoshana? What do you think?
I've got so many people in my house right now. um,
Shoshana, yeah,
yes.
if you didn't have 20 people living in your house and in your shelter,
The
what would
answer
you
is
think?
yes. I think we honestly are obviously analyzing as much as we can. And it's incredible what the Israeli Air Force, what the Israeli IDF and the American have done together. The coordination, the absolute like ability to do what they've done. It's crazy because at the end of the day, as much as it's scary, as much as we're going to the bomb shelter, we're okay. Like overall, there are people dead. And someone else unfortunately was just killed. But I feel like for what's happening, for the amount of firepower, like they're doing an amazing job. And yes, I did think it would be done soon, and now I'm thinking probably not for a while.
I mean, when you hear Trump speak and Hesketh speak, you think honestly, we've destroyed their entire navy. Their air force is non-existent. Of course, they've got a lot of drone capabilities, but more interestingly or tragically, they're really lashing out anywhere they can. And you think to yourself, okay, maybe the initial rationale behind it is let's push the Saudis and the UAE and everybody else and Kuwait and Qatar, let's push them into pushing Trump to stop the war. And now, is it having the opposite effect, or is it just our kind of wishful thinking that is having the opposite effect? Because they seem to be standing their ground quite well, the Gulf, more than I actually ever imagined. Emily, what do you think about that?
I think they've massively overplayed their hand when it comes to bombing literally every single country that they can reach around them. They've bombed what, 12 countries now in the past week? Like it's insane. It's crazy, and I'm pleased to see that many of these countries have taken a very strong stance against the Islamic Republic, have not resorted to saying, "Oh, well, it's Israel's fault and it's Israel who did this." Of certainly the United States is partially to thank for that reaction, I think. But the idea that they fired more ballistic missiles and suicide drones at the UAE than they have at Israel, I mean, they're lashing out. Like this regime is losing control. And my favorite part was how the regime's president Masoud Pezeshkian, he's apologized to these countries, just on Sunday. Yeah, he apologized to them and said, "We're going to stop attacking these countries." And like a few hours later, Bahrain and UAE were both attacked again. So they continued this. I think the IRGC doesn't have a connects to some of the political bodies right now. I mean, nobody really knows what's going on. So that's a good thing. That's expected at this point, if we're on course. But we'll see what happens.
Ron, do you think Emily's correct? I really believe exactly like Emily, they've overplayed their hand. Even Qatar is talking and seems angry. Or are we really not seeing the full picture? How do your friends in the Gulf speak to you right now? Because I've had some conversations, and that most of them are being very, very kind of steadfast resilience. I can't believe we're facing the same enemy. Thank God for the Abraham Accords. And then I hear different voices saying they're going to blame us in the end for all of this.
They've lost all their friends, except those in the West who are crying for the death of Khamenei, those who have never been to our region. They've lost all their friends. They're literally dying and trying to inflict as much pain and damage in the region as much as possible.
Yeah.
To play the victims, because many in the West believe them, unfortunately. But let's take a step back and look at what's really happening here. You don't have to like Bibi and Trump. And those leaders are not meant to become your husbands. They are not your best friends. They are leaders. And in those moments, in such moments, you do know who's a true leader and who is not. This would have never been achieved. This decimation or near decimation of the axis of resistance would have never been achieved had many, many, many events did not take place in the past decade, including the Abraham Accords, which helps us understand today who is our ally and who is our enemy. The way everybody came together to fight against this mad beast in Iran is unprecedented, and it sets the tone and the direction for the future Middle East. I'm very optimistic, even though it's going to take a while, but we are witnessing the end of the axis of evil.
Oh my God, Ron, I hope, honestly, from your mouth to God's ears, I truly believe that. This is what my friends in the Gulf are telling me. But I hope that that this is really the beginning of the end and the beginning of a new region, because that's really all we've ever wanted. Okay, and on that positive note, we go to our very popular, and every week more and more scumbags appear. We can't really wade through enough of these people, especially now, because at times of war is where you can see who's a hero and who's a scumbag. So, scumbag of the week. Shoshana, let's start with you. Who's your scumbag this week?
You know, yesterday was International Women's Day, and my scumbag is a woman who denies the rape and suffering of other women, Israeli women. Brianna Joy Gray has tweeted at least twice this week, saying once, unlike the mass rape hoax, the 160 children of the U.S. of Israel murdered, I see what she did there. U.S. of Israel murdered in a double tap strike are very real. And she also retweeted someone who said, absolutely zero named allegations of rape by Israelis by Palestinians on October 7th. No allegations, let alone evidence. And this woman, she's the one who eye rolled when sister of a hostage was speaking on her show.
Ronen sister.
Thank you. You have to be such an evil human being to continue to deny the rape and sexual assaults, especially even after they've come out of captivity and spoken. Numerous, both men and women, have spoken about the rape that they have gone through in captivity, let alone October 7th. And I just have to say, Brianna, you are truly a scumbag. You are many choice words that I can't say because I don't say these things out loud, but truly you have to be an evil woman to deny sexual assault and rape, no matter how badly you want to hate a country.
So true. There's a special place in hell for women like her. The good news is she got fired from her job after the eye roll. I'm not sure where she's landed, so she might be annoyed about the fact she doesn't have a job, but she is an truly evil women, the same believe women crowd who don't believe Israeli women, and they're not believing Iranian women either, who are being tortured and raped before they get killed under the IRGC. Anyway, fantastic scumbag. I'm glad you brought it up. It is International Women's Month, and International Women's Day was yesterday. And we pray that in this International Women's Month, we will see the liberation of the women of Iran who are living under a female Holocaust. Honestly, no other way to look at it. Emily, who's your scumbag this week?
Well, I guess we have a theme today because I also have a rape denier, the wife of Mamdani, Rama Duwaji. So this woman who is, I believe, of Syrian descent, it was discovered this week that she's been very active on social media. She's been liking lots and lots of posts glorifying October 7th. She liked a post that was calling what happened on October 7th a mass rape hoax. Nice one. She also liked a bunch of photos and videos of Hamas actually committing the massacres of October 7th. And, Mamdani came out in response saying, oh, well, it's my wife's views, not mine, and she's not a public figure. She's a private citizen, whatever, fine. But, it's just more fuel for the fire, more evidence that proves exactly where the Mamdanis really stand on these issues. This is not a normal mainstream view. He's a fringe extremist who surrounds himself with even more fringe extremists that do not have the best interests of Americans, or certainly not New Yorkers, as his priority. And I don't think anybody should be trusting this person. I mean, New York is in for a world of hurt. It's already started, but it's only the beginning.
Yeah. Meanwhile, he can't pick up the rubbish or plow the snow, but, has a lot of views on geopolitics. And, this excuse, oh, it's my wife and not me. If Melania had said anything, which is the mildest thing in the world, nobody would have said, oh, it's his wife and not him. The hypocrisy also of the media, to give her a free pass on being a terrorist sympathizer is disgusting. She is a very worthy scumbag. Thank you, Emily. Okay, Rowan, I can't wait to hear yours. Who's your scumbag this week?
I'm never comfortable in calling anybody scumbag, but this time I'll do it gladly. Naim Qasim, the new Secretary General of Hezbollah. I mean, at least the former one, at least Hassan Nasrallah had charisma. He had a brain. This guy is useless, he's spineless, he's a parrot, and he's so egoistic. In his last address to the Lebanese people, he said that they will continue with their assault against Israel until death. You can die alone. He's obviously committing suicide, condemned every member of Hezbollah to suicide, but I'd rather they did it on their own. And he's insisting he might be following the directions of the Iranians because, as you said, Fleur, they owe them a lot of money, etc. But I don't care. The amount of egoism you must have watching 1 million barefoot sleeping on the streets in Lebanon. The amount of people who are begging him, literally begging him to shut up already, and he's not listening. So, as he's decided that he's going all the way with this, and as the Israeli defense minister recently said that Naim Qasim is now on their hit list, please, Israel, do grant him his wish.
Yeah. Yes, it's a great scumbag. You're right. He's got zero presence. I mean, but he got the job, which means he's on the hit list, and he's indeed a scumbag. Thank you very much. Now, I'm changing tact a little bit. Last week, I made Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron my scumbags for being wimps and weak. And I got hundreds of messages on my social media from good Spaniards saying to me, why didn't you add Pedro Sanchez to that list? And I responded and I said, because Pedro Sanchez, the Prime Minister of Spain, deserves his own scumbag. I didn't want to lump him in with the two wimps. I wanted to give him his own spotlight because honestly, it doesn't get worse than Pedro Sanchez in Europe. He is the agent of China. He is the agent of Venezuela. Before Maduro got arrested, that was a tough break for Pedro Sanchez. He is part of this international socialist cabal that is basically allying himself with the worst perpetrators of human rights violations in the world, and yet he has the chutzpah, the cheek, to call himself standing in anti-war. So what happened in the last week and a half? That he basically said that the U.S. could not use Spanish bases to use for the offensive or defensive or anything else. Now, he also said that they should continue to try and negotiate dialogue, even though he knows how poisonous the Islamic regime is. And in all of the massacres that the Islamic regime did on their own people, that dignified him to make one tweet about being concerned about the people of Iran. That's all he cared. But of course, since Trump and Israel went to try and eliminate the main threat to humanity, all he's done is criticize Israel and the US and declared big declarations that he's anti-war and he's not allowing them to use his bases. Now, I love the way that Trump said, listen, if we wanted to use your bases, we would just use them. Secondly, Spain is part of NATO. Let's not forget, Spain is part of NATO. They don't pay their dues. They haven't paid their increased dues that Trump insisted on. And in fact, this is where the hypocrisy lies. They want to use the protection of the US in NATO, but at the same time, they want to ally themselves with the worst dictatorships in the world. And if you don't have proof enough of what a scumbag Pedro Sanchez is, The Iranian Islamic Republic congratulated him. They sent him a thank you note for standing on the right side of history. And all of this, please everyone, let's not forget, is wrapped in the fact that he is surrounded with corruption charges. His wife has been indicted. His brother has been indicted for having a fake job that Pedro Sanchez got to him. And the people of Spain have had it. He's been in power for 8 years and hasn't had a budget for 3, against the Constitution. And the people, he can't give a speech anywhere because he gets booed everywhere. The good people of Spain understand what a corrupt, horrible leader. And the best thing is that Trump then threatened that they were going to cut trade ties with Spain. And the next day he came out defiant, saying he didn't care. And his little foreign minister crawled into the White House to try and put out that fire. So Pedro Sanchez, you have been the most frequent scumbag from me. I think this is the 4th time. You are a hypocrite, you are corrupt, and you're an anti-Semite. Eres un hipócrita, eres un antisemita, y eres un corrupto. Y la gente de España están hartos de ti. So, Pedro Sanchez, for the 4th time, it's a record, you are my scumbag of the week.
Did you see the Iranians go to the Israeli embassy in Spain and like throwing flowers? It's the best. After he came out, they said, they're like, we don't believe that. We don't feel that way. And they're like tossing flowers. The guard's like, what are you doing? They're like, we just want to give flowers to the Israelis for saying.
They've been screaming against him, and also a message also came out in the Spanish European Parliament, and actually reprimanded him publicly and said, "Why are you standing with the people killing my people? How dare you?" So yeah, I mean, but you know, but the thing is that the Spanish people hate him. That's the thing. They really can't stand him. There's a very small minority of people that are still standing with him, very small, because I'm getting messages all the time from Spanish people saying, "We've had it, please make him your scumbag of the week." And so I abide. We need to cleanse our souls with a little bit of positivity so that we can really withstand another week of Iranian Islamic regime attacks on our country and running to shelters. So we need to bring some positive vibes. And we go to our heroes of the week. Shoshana, who's your hero this week?
Oh, my heroes, my heroines are the female pilots, navigators, support staff, at least 30 in the Israeli Air Force, and I'm sure many more in the American Air Force. These videos are like if the crazy bad videos are like depressing, these videos are like the opposite of kryptonite, whatever that is. I'm loving it. I'm inhaling it, like injected in my veins. These women, I love it. The idea that like American and Israeli women are going in and taking down the Iranian regime, the Islamic regime, is chef's kiss for me, and I'm loving it. And I just like, can you just pick me up on the way? I'll like gotta go. Just bring me. I want to go. I know it sounds like very childish, but like I love it. It just, these women are my heroines. They're there. They're doing the hard work, ejecting out of airplanes. That the Kuwait army shot down 3, and the woman just like, what's up? Here I am. It just gives me a lot of positive vibes. And every time like they fly over, I'm wondering if there's a lady in there, if there's a woman in there, like fulfilling her dream of being a pilot and trying to save a lot of women and girls from a horrible, horrible regime.
And liberating the women of Iran. And really just, I couldn't agree more. It really is oxygen to us right now. It's wonderful to watch.
I wish they would go a little further and go into and take out the Taliban, but I know we can't do that.
Maybe next time, maybe the next. I mean, who are your heroes or heroines?
So my heroines this week is the Iranian national women's football team. They are currently in Australia competing, and they, as a symbol of protest, refused to sing the national anthem at the opening ceremony of the match that they're at, the tournament that they're at. And the Islamic Republic immediately came out threatening them. There were calls to deal with them as they deal with collaborators with the enemy and the Zionists and all those terms that they love to throw out there. when they return to Iran. So there's been a lot of concern for their safety, obviously. I myself am worried based on what we're seeing from the Islamic Republic in response. In the second match, they did sort of sing the national anthem at the beginning of the match, but the damage was already done, and there's a lot of discussion and concern that their families will be persecuted as well. Now, that's one of the things that the Islamic Republic has always used to lord over the heads of athletes and public figures who do have the ability to travel abroad. But right now, there's a bit of a crisis going on inside Australia because there were literally protests outside these events, these football matches. There were Iranians who were begging these girls to defect and to stay in Australia, knowing that their lives were at risk. And of course, they know this as well. They've been watched like hawks by the regime officials that travel with these athletes who travel abroad. They probably have no physical way to even be able to defect if that's what they wanted. But that's the situation right now. They're currently still, as of now, inside their hotel, I'm told, on lockdown. Instead of intervening or issuing a statement or anything like that, the Australian government has done nothing, has not stated that they would provide these girls with any kind of protection. And when one of the buses drove away at the end of the match, there was a video that surfaced last night of some of the players signaling help in sign language to the protesters who were outside. Now, the protesters actually tried to stop this bus physically, and then the Australian police intervened and forced all of the protesters to leave so that the bus could drive away with those girls. It's just a really disgusting scene to look at. They're obviously in danger. We're talking about a psychotic regime that is on the verge of falling. We know that those girls are going to be persecuted in one way or the other with their families. I mean, the Australian government needs to step up and do something now because this has the potential to be massive. So these are my heroes for their courage despite all odds. But it's also really a call to action that people need to apply pressure to Australia right now and other countries as well. I know a few people were like, bring them all to Canada. We don't care. Bring the whole team. Let them defect. But their lives are certainly in danger.
For sure, their lives are in danger. And it's really disgusting that the Australians are not that the Australian government is not trying to do more. Who the hell are they pandering to? And
How is
what?
that defensible?
It's ridiculous.
How is it defensible? How do you know?
This is what you exist. You are a society supposed to be democratic and free. This is the reason you exist, to give shelter, not to economic migrants, but to these type of people who are under persecution. Their lives are in danger if they go back to their country. What are you worth? You can't even do this. What are you worth?
Yep.
Disgraceful. But they are heroines, and there is kind of this international sign of help, isn't it, for women. And they were doing that. It killed me when I saw that bus, and it really made my stomach churn. And I wish we could give them immunity and somehow they could come here. But like you say, Emily, it's also their families. What are they going to do with their families that are still back home? That's the danger. Oh, God protect them. God protect them and give people the clarity to do the right thing. Rowan, who is your hero this week?
My hero this week is called Sami Jmail. He's the head of the Kataib party in Lebanon. A few days ago, they held a conference in Le Gray Hotel in Beirut, discussing the pros and cons of normalization with Israel. That is a first, talking about a taboo. In the past 60 years, nobody would dare even discuss peace with Israel. But now it's time. And if all the Lebanese had the spine Sami Jmail has, we would have gotten rid of Hezbollah a long time ago. Bear in mind that his uncle, Bashir Jmail, was assassinated in the 80s, and he is one of the very few Lebanese who spoke directly to the Israelis, received them in Beirut. Now it's no longer a secret. And although every prominent voice in Lebanon was assassinated not long ago, after the assassination of Hassan Nasrallah, a lot of people in Lebanon dare speak up. What is done is unprecedented. They did not decide to go for peace with Israel, but the sheer fact, creating a platform attended by politicians, journalists, policymakers, discussing the pros and cons, and criticizing Hezbollah is a massive, massive event. And a few days ago, he called upon the Lebanese government and the Lebanese army to arrest all Hezbollah members, to arrest Naim Qassem, arrest the Secretary General, force them to disarm. They will not do it voluntarily. He also called upon the Lebanese government to sever all diplomatic ties with the Iranians and to expel their diplomats. And he called them explicitly agents collaborating with the IRGC or agents of the IRGC who were wounded during the pager operation. We have proof. We will not forgive them. Remember the massive explosion at the harbor in Beirut?
Yes.
They've caused enough damage already, and I truly admire his stance, and may he inspire more and more Lebanese. Sami Ismail, you're my hero this week.
Amen. Absolutely. These are the heroes when they come out against the grain and put their lives at risk in order to do the right thing for their country and their people. Wonderful. And I mean, we hope that he's very successful. Maybe he could even be a government leader of the future, hopefully. These are the type of leaders that we need to make a new region. So I'm changing a little bit tact. My hero this week is a Spanish guy staying with Spain called Aldo Comas. Why is he my hero? Now, he in Spain, there's these, awards like movie, TV, art awards, like we see in Hollywood every other week. And in Spain, they're called the Goya Awards. And so everybody shows up to this Goya Awards. Everybody's wearing their little, watermelon, free Palestine zombies. And he gets stopped and asked at the entrance of the awards, so what do you think? What do you think about what's going on? And he says, what I'm really surprised to see is that nobody's saying a word about the 50,000, 30,000 innocent Iranians that have been killed by the regime. Why is it that nobody is talking about the fact that more innocent Iranians have been killed than in the whole entire Gaza war, and they're still giving us these little watermelons to wear? Why is nobody talking about this?
Yo no he oído a nadie hablar de los 50.000 muertos que ha habido los últimos 2 meses en Irán. Nadie habla de ello. Veo muchos pins de todo, pero de eso no lo sé. Quizá también hemos de acabar con regímenes teocráticos que asesinan a sus poblaciones.
This guy Aldo, all right, who I didn't even know existed, but he's done what no artist in any country, anywhere in the world, the whole of Hollywood, think about the Grammys and the Emmys and the Critics' Choice Awards and all of these awards that have happened in the last few weeks. And nobody has said a word about Iran. Not one person. And this guy in Spain goes to these awards full of these woke zombie idiots. And he goes and says, why isn't anybody talking about Iran? The next day, when he got, you can imagine how many messages of hate he got. He also got a lot of messages of thank you by Iranians, saying thank you for being the only person in this whole genre around the world who's talking about our plight. And then he went and he doubled down. And you know what he said? He said all of the whole industry is set around the whole Free Palestine movement. We get given and shoved in our faces these little badges, whether we want them or not, on the watermelon. And I've had it, because this is hypocrisy. And so for speaking out, for being the only person in this genre in the entire world, in all of these, shows of people giving each other awards, the only person talking about the innocent Iranians' plight has been this Aldo Comas. So for me, he's my hero this week.
It's a great hero.
Really, it's just incredible. And the next day he doubled down. He didn't try and get out of it. He says, I can't take this watermelon anymore. He gets shoved in our faces, he said. It's amazing. Anyway, thank God that for so many scumbags, there's so many heroes, and we will continue to pray for the end of the evil in the region and around the world. The world has its test right now, the way that they did in the 1930s with the Nazi regime. The Islamic Republic of Iran and all of their friends, they're getting less, as Rohan said, They are the Nazis of our era. See where everybody's going to stand, and we pray for the liberation of innocent people in Iran and the entire region, and we hope to see you next week. Keep safe, everyone.
And now a break from all of this news about war. It's International Women's Day, and a new report released for this day shows that while more women are entering Israel's high-tech sector, major gaps in pay, leadership, and entrepreneurship remain. ILTV's Mayan Hoffman has the story.
A new report from the Israel Innovation Authority paints a mixed picture of women in Israel's high-tech industry. Significant progress in education and employment, but stubborn gaps in pay, leadership, and entrepreneurship that have barely shifted in decades. According to the report, women now account for about 34% of Israel's high-tech workforce, roughly 135,000 employees. That share, however, has remained largely unchanged for nearly 30 years, even as the sector itself has expanded dramatically. One of the most striking findings is the wage gap. On average, women working in high-tech earn around 23,000 shekels per month, compared to 33,000 shekels for men, a difference of about 44%. The gap persists even within the same types of jobs. In research and development roles, men earn roughly 44% more than women, while in headquarters roles, the gap grows to nearly 48%. At senior management levels, the disparities become even larger. At the same time, the pipeline of women entering technology fields has expanded sharply. Over the past decade, the number of female students studying high-tech disciplines in Israeli universities and colleges has increased by 116%, driven largely by growth in computer science programs. Still, women make up only about 34% of students in high-tech fields and remain significantly underrepresented in core engineering disciplines such as electrical and mechanical engineering. The gaps begin even earlier. In Israel's high schools, only about 1/3 of students taking advanced computer science exams are girls, even though boys and girls participate in advanced mathematics at nearly equal rates. The report also highlights disparities in leadership and entrepreneurship. Women account for just 16% of development managers in high-tech companies and fewer than 11% of startup CEOs. When it comes to investment, the numbers are even smaller. Only about 8% of funding rounds in recent years involve companies led by female CEOs. The Innovation Authority warns that if these gaps persist, Israel risks leaving a significant portion of its talent untapped. Officials say closing the gap will require action across the entire pipeline, from encouraging girls to study technology in school to expanding opportunities for women in management, entrepreneurship, and decision-making roles across the high-tech ecosystem.
Here in Israel in 10 a.m. in New York, and we are on day 16 of Operation Roaring Lion. And these are all the latest developments. Israel came under fresh missile and rocket fire overnight and throughout the day today, with launches from both Iran and Lebanon. Sirens sounded across central Israel several times, with several small impact sites in Tel Aviv and other areas, which caused minor injuries and damages to properties, including to a preschool and several vehicles. Additional alerts were triggered early this morning after projectiles were launched towards southern Israel, while a rocket fired from Lebanon triggered sirens in central Israel and was also intercepted by air defenses. This follows a number of missile and rocket volleys overnight and over the weekend. And so joining us now with the latest is ILTV's executive editor, Mayan Hoffman, joining us live now from Jerusalem. Mayan, thanks for joining us. Can you bring us up to date on the latest developments?
Sure. So as you mentioned, there's just been a series of rocket sirens and rockets fall, shrapnel from rockets, cluster bombs falling throughout the country. The latest attack that happened in the afternoon struck several places in central Israel. One of those areas was the ultra-Orthodox city of Bnei Brak, where it's actually had several either direct hits or hits by shrapnel throughout the last couple of weeks of war. And there was actually a shrapnel piece that fell directly into the street. They took hours to clean it up. We saw residents flocking to the street to see the crater-sized damage that was actually done on that street in Bnei Brak. Coming out of the city, though, there is a miracle story, apparently, where the rocket hit, causing, of course, an explosion and several pieces of not only shrapnel, but also damage that flew into various apartment buildings in the area. One of the apartment buildings was the home of a young girl who had been on the bed just moments before, moved to the shelter from the exact location where debris fell and could have obviously severely injured that child. So she was saved in just a minute before that shrapnel fell. And that follows a weekend, as we talked about, of several rocket attacks. Over the weekend, there was shrapnel hits, cluster bomb hits in many different locations, including all the way down in Eilat. We saw rockets from the north all the way to the south. And here in Jerusalem, there was also some shrapnel that fell on a local apartment building in southern Jerusalem. That building experienced severe damage, both in the parking lot as well as on the rooftop of the building. I was there today and looking at the huge Jerusalem stones that were blown off the roof. It was actually mind-boggling. We've been getting used to it, but we've seen these huge ballistic warheads, the signs of double-decker buses dropping down, obviously flattening buildings. The new cluster bombs don't have the same effect, but they certainly cause more wide-ranging damage, hitting more cities at once and not leveling buildings, but still giving them a pretty big knock.
Absolutely. So we are seeing these cluster bombs do a lot more damage. And that's, of course, as you mentioned, the miracle that the child made it into the bomb shelter. That's why it's so important to follow guidelines from Homefront Command, that when you hear that alert, when you hear that siren, you have to go into the bomb shelter. And speaking of which, I do want to talk to you about the latest guidelines from the Homefront Command, because we know that there is an ease of restrictions in some parts of Israel, but many parts still with very limited restrictions in place.
Yeah, that's correct, Lidar, for sure. So first of all, the Homefront Command announced today that they're going to be changing the way that the warning siren rings, where it's going to be. There's going to be new jurisdictions. Now, this is important because what's been happening is that we get two sets of sirens when Iran launches rockets. The first one is a warning to let us know that Iran has launched rockets toward the country. And the second is the actual siren, where you have about 90 seconds to get into your shelter. Now, for those of us, for example, in Jerusalem, we've received many more warning sirens than we have actual sirens. This is causing more people to panic. So they've now decided that they're going to change the area. We make new jurisdictions so that fewer people receive the warning siren if there's less likely to be getting a rocket from Iran. So that's the first thing. But as you mentioned, most areas of the country are not going to be changing any restrictions. However, there will be some new areas. The Homefront Command has labeled them as yellow areas. These are different locations, mostly southern Israel, where for rocket attacks. And so starting tomorrow at 6 a.m., children in those areas will be able to go back to school so long as there is shelter in the school. In addition to that, we're going to see people, they've already been allowed to go back to work and get to continue to do that. And in those areas, also gatherings will be expanded. Today, in most part of the country, you can't gather with more than 50 people in a location, again, only a location near a bomb shelter. But starting tomorrow at 6, in those areas, 100 people will be able to gather in those spaces, again, providing a shelter. Now, it is important to note that Homefront Command has made very clear that if they see any change, that we will have the same restrictions put back in place, and that it is very, very important that if you are not in one of those yellow areas, that you continue to adhere to the existing restrictions. They will continue to evaluate them day by day. But as we heard from the IDF, we're expecting this war to go on longer than we originally thought, at least until Passover, it seems. We spent Purim in shelters, possibly also Passover, but people need to really adhere to those restrictions, which is going back to that first report. We saw today in Tel Aviv, a rocket shrapnel fall down, and somebody, I understand, broke both of his legs, was blown to the side of the road. There was video from that attack. A miracle in Bnei Brak because the young girl was in the shelter. So Homefront Command guidelines are guidelines. They're really not just recommendations, they are guidelines for your safety as a community.
Absolutely. Maayan Hoffman, thank you so much for the update at this hour.
Thank you.
And meanwhile, the Israel Defense Forces says its air campaign inside Iran is intensifying, with more than 200 targets struck in the past day alone. IDF Chief of Staff Eyal Zamir said just recently that contrary to reports in foreign media, Israel does not face any shortage of interceptor missiles, and that he expects the war will continue through Passover. That's at least another 2 weeks. Meanwhile, the IDF says it still has thousands of targets to strike inside Iran, and revealed that many of the strikes to date have been focused specifically on Iranian missile launchers in an effort to reduce the scale of attacks on Israeli territory. Meanwhile, Defense Minister Israel Katz made statements over the weekend regarding the operation. Let's listen to what he had to say.
גם חיל האוויר הישראלי ממשיך בגל תקיפות עוצמתי בטהרן ובכל איראן. איראן מפעילה טרור וסחטנות אזורית ועולמית כדי להרתיע את ישראל וארצות הברית מלהמשיך במערכה, ונענית בעוצמת פלדה חזקה ובלתי מתפשרת. אנחנו נכנסים לישורת ההכרעה במאבק בניסיונות המשטר לשרוד, תוך גרימת סבל הולך וגובר לעם האיראני לבין כניעה. רק העם האיראני יכול לשים לזה סוף במאבק נחוש עד להפלת משטר הטרור והצלת איראן.
And the United States is also escalating its military campaign against Iran, striking targets on Karj Island, the country's main oil export terminal, while vowing to keep open the Strait of Hormuz amid Iranian efforts to block and target shipping. U.S. President Donald Trump says American forces totally obliterated Iranian military targets on the island, which handles around 90% of Iran's oil exports. And Trump said oil facilities were spared for now, but warned they could be targeted if Iran continues to threaten shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. The president also said multiple countries may send warships to help protect the oil tankers, including China, France, Japan, South Korea, and the United Kingdom. Trump said the U.S. will ensure the strait is open, safe, and free one way or the other. And speaking to reporters earlier this weekend, U.S. President Trump had this to say about the war.
Are you speaking with Prime Minister Netanyahu, and are your objectives the same in terms of ending the war?
Well, I think they might be a little different, I guess. You know, they're a different country than we are. But he will tell you there's never been a power like the power of the United States. I built our military in my first term.
How long now do you think the war is likely to last?
I can't tell you that. I mean, I have my own idea, but what good does it do? It'll be as long as it's necessary. They've been decimated. Their country's in bad shape. The whole thing is collapsing.
And joining us now with more on the situation inside of Iran is Tamal Gindin, an expert on Iran at the Esli Center at Haifa University. Tamal, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So, can you share with us what the situation is like for the people of Iran inside the country today, after nearly 2 weeks of war?
It's very difficult to get exact information because the internet is mostly down. It's almost completely blocked. The 1% is people with very high technical abilities or regime accounts that can still connect freely to the web, and they give the Islamic Republic propaganda. What I could make out of things that my friends can gather from their friends, I'm only in touch with Iranians through third parties, so as not to put them in danger, is that they don't want to read foreign media about the situation in Iran because their spirit is not broken, but outside they say that their spirit is broken. There have been a lot of things that also hurt civilians. One of the major things was last Saturday, not yesterday, Saturday before, bombing the oil repositories in Tehran, creating an environmental disaster with all the smoke, and then the rain came down, so the air got clear, but the rain itself was polluted. The island of Kharg, I think that it was a good idea to bomb the military bases and not the oil infrastructure, because one should keep in mind that there is the day after the war. Hopefully, with a better regime or with a better government, maybe even one that the Islamic people want. Although it seems that Trump's advisors are not on the Iranian people's side, but on the Islamic Republic's side so far. But for Iran of the day after, all the oil infrastructure and economic infrastructure are very important. We want to rebuild Iran after the Islamic Republic falls. That's another thing, that the name Iran often serves for the Islamic Republic, but one should distinguish between the people and the land and the resources that are used by the IRGC. Okay, that oil repository was used by the IRGC, but also by the people, and it was a great fire next to residential areas. So I thought it would turn the people against the war, because so far the people have been very, very supportive of the war. The minute the war broke, they were dancing in the street. The minute it was announced that the leader died, there was dancing and demonstrations of happiness and dances on social media. We get it less because there's, people got used to it. But from what I hear, the spirit is not broken, or at least not to the extent that's portrayed in foreign media.
Absolutely, because the internet is still shut down inside of Iran. So most of what we are seeing coming out of Iran, although we are seeing a lot of social media videos come out still, but the majority of the information that's being put out there is put out by the Islamic regime itself. That's a very, very important point. And I do want to ask you what the status of the regime is today, because we've seen thousands of bombs dropped. We've seen Israel and the U.S. target so many regime, not only officials, but also infrastructure. What is the status today of the regime?
That's one of the most mysterious questions, because there is a new leader. He was inaugurated last Monday, with a picture, because he was not present. No one has seen him since February 28th. We don't know if he's alive. If he's alive, we don't know if he's conscious. We don't know what his condition is. His first address to the nation was read by a television, so no one has seen him. But also before that, people say that he was very influential in the regime, but it was always behind the scenes. So maybe they're either trying to have a leader, but not have a leader. Some Iranians say that they're trying to put Israel and the U.S. on a manhunt on a person who doesn't exist, so as to make us waste energy. And others say that he's in coma, and there's some committee now that's running the country, maybe the Guardian Council, and they're just saying that he said that. And to me, it reminds me of the hidden imam of the 12 Shia. That's the religion of the Islamic Republic. They have 12 imams that continue Muhammad, and the last one disappeared when he was 4 or 5, and he will return at the end of days. And I've already seen social media accounts, of course, linked to the Islamic Republic, that call Moshtaba Khamenei the hidden imam, not only the hidden leader. So it's all very, very suspicious, all the things that are going on around him.
A lot of psychological warfare and
a lot of
misinformation being put out by the regime. Now, I do want to ask, because the IDF has been degrading the internal suppression forces, but there's a lot of speculation and a lot less certainty, as you said, that while before there seemed to be real confidence that the people of Iran could, at the end of this war, bring down the regime, today it seems some leaders are not as confident. You said the Iranian spirit is not broken. I mean, we've seen tremendous, incredible resilience and bravery from the people of Iran. So what do you make of this? Do you think this regime's days are numbered, or will it be able to, come out on the other side of this war?
The reason I think Trump's advisors are from the regime lobby is because I know some names, and I know that they are from regime lobby. I see what they write, what their reactions on social media are to what they write. And Trump says he wants someone from the inside because Pahlavi, the crown prince, doesn't have grassroots support. Now, he ignores the fact that in the demonstrations, they called out his name. He ignores the fact that when he said Thursday night, everyone's on the street, the demonstrations turned from thousands to millions. They ignore the fact that even anti-royalists inside Iran support Pahlavi now because he's the image around which they can all unite. And he says he doesn't want to be a king like his father, but just stabilize Iran and then hand it to the Iranian people for a government that of their choice. And when the internet in Iran was blocked, his views on Twitter dropped by tens of millions of views per video. So he does have support inside. All the Iranians say they support him inside and out. But what Trump says is, I want someone from the inside. But all the people on the inside are from the regime, whether they're reformist or fundamentalists, they are all from the regime. And the people, this is a demonstration from outside Iran. This is from inside Iran, what we see now, burning a mosque and chanting, Iran, Iran. This is what they do. The war in January was Iran against the Islamic Republic. And another demonstration chant is اصلاح طلب اصولگرا دیگه تموم ماجرا. Reformist, fundamentalist, your story is over. They don't want someone from the inside, but the Iranian lobby on the outside is very strong. They have professors who write articles in English, who are advisors to the Department of State or to the president, and even analysts who read articles in English instead of listening to what the demonstrators say.
So the Islamic regime's arm stretching into Washington, D.C., although I wouldn't discount President Trump yet because he has a way of surprising the world. But Tamal Gindin,
I'll just say that Iranians themselves say, okay, so he said that. He says one thing and the opposite every day, a few times. We have to see what he does and not what he says.
Absolutely. And time, of course, will tell. Tamal Gindin, thank you so much for joining us today and for giving us just a brief insight into life inside of Iran. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And pivoting now to the northern front, the IDF continued intensive airstrikes across Lebanon over the past day, targeting positions belonging to Hezbollah. But before we get into the IDF's operations in Lebanon, a short update at this hour. The IDF spokesperson has revealed that the terrorist who carried out the attack on the synagogue in Michigan last week, that's the car ramming attack in the United States, was actually the brother of a Hezbollah commander who was eliminated by IDF strikes last week as well. So we have two brothers, one a terrorist in Hezbollah trying to kill Israelis in Israel, and the other a terrorist in the United States trying to kill Jews in Michigan. Neither one particularly successful, both now eliminated. And with that, back to IDF operations in Lebanon, the military says fighter jets hit rocket launchers, weapons depots, and command sites used by Hezbollah, all part of an effort to reduce the threat to northern Israel. We have IDF ground troops stepping up operations over the weekend, reportedly killing dozens of Hezbollah operatives during targeted raids in southern Lebanon. Now, the IDF says forces are clearing Hezbollah infrastructure and destroying weapons, but despite the heavy losses, Hezbollah is believed to still retain about 20% of its pre-war capabilities, including the ability to fire rockets and missiles towards Israeli communities. And Israel is reportedly preparing for a major ground offensive in southern Lebanon aimed at pushing Hezbollah away from the border and destroying its military infrastructure. U.S. and Israeli officials say the plan would see forces seize the area south of the Litani River. Now, this reports come after Hezbollah fired more than 200 rockets toward northern Israel in a coordinated attack with Iran last week. Meanwhile, the IDF chief has ordered a broad reinforcements of troops in the north, and reserve forces are also being mobilized as the IDF prepares for multiple offensive and defensive scenarios. And at the same time, a new diplomatic push may soon bring direct talks between Israel and Lebanon. According to reports in the Israeli media, the reports say negotiations could begin in the coming days, possibly in either Paris or Cyprus, as part of an international effort to end the fighting with Hezbollah. Now, the diplomatic initiative, backed by France and the United States, could also include formal Lebanese recognition of Israel. Now, under the reported plan, the Lebanese armed forces would deploy south of Litani, take responsibility for disarming Hezbollah, and pretty much the same thing we heard in the previous ceasefire. So with that, I would like to invite our next guest, Dr. Barak Books, the Patterson Chair in Security and Intelligence and a lecturer at the Political Studies and Communication Schools at Bar-Ilan Universities. Barak, great to have you on.
Good afternoon.
So the big question today, which is it? Is Israel heading towards a war, a ground invasion of Lebanon, or to a possible peace treaty with Lebanon?
I think parallel lines, meaning that there is, and I reported in many interviews that I held, that for almost 2 weeks there are efforts of producing some sort of a ceasefire, beginning with the chief of staff of the French army meeting the head of the Lebanese army, beginning with meetings in the house of Nabi Berri, the head of Amal, with the Lebanese prime minister and the chief executive consulting the president. And also something interesting, that in Al Mayadin, which is a channel affiliated to Hezbollah, the head of the branch from Geneva of this channel quoted France saying that they want to go back to December 2024, meaning this is the will of Hezbollah. This is one line. But the other line is that Hezbollah had been discovered to have and maintain a very lethal weapon, and it's bombing with the, let's say, collaboration with Iran, almost in a coherent manner, our country. And thus, this has to be stopped. The lesson that we learned from that, in one sentence, is that albeit operations of the Lebanese army, and they did do something, Hezbollah maintained power, and it's still threatening.
Absolutely, because, the peace treaty would offer recognition of Israel, this according to reports, and that is a very, very tempting offer. But it would also force Lebanon to disarm Hezbollah and push it back to the Litani. And as I mentioned, this is exactly what was already expected of Lebanon in the previous ceasefire agreement. I mean, so what's changed now? Why should Israel agree to this now, when it's clear that Lebanon cannot or will not fulfill this part of the agreement to essentially disarm and push back Hezbollah?
Okay, I want to do a reality check. Israel and Lebanon signed a peace agreement in May 1983, and I'm teaching my students and showing them videos, and they're astonished. But the thing is, the Lebanese never consider it to be a peace, but the end to the 1982 entrance of the Israeli army to Lebanon. Lebanon does not, is afraid, let's say, of saying the word peace. And I'm not expecting a peace, but some sort of an agreement of a ceasefire. The thing is with Hezbollah, we have to understand the Shiites. And the Shiites 50 years ago, in the outbreak of the civil war, did not have any status in Lebanon, and suddenly they became the bread takers and those who run the country. In their eyes, psychologically, giving up the weapons is going back in a bad memory lane to the 70s to being the servants of the affluent persons of Beirut. They cannot do that. What can we do? First of all, the Lebanese army operated in a minor manner, but it portrayed it as they did so much, brought diplomats to the border, and even the head of the army presented a report that went high to the French President Macron of 566 rockets and 177 launchers and tunnels, etc., and 11 passes. I must say that Lebanese army soldiers were killed in dismantling one of the tunnels near Tyre. But it's not enough. And maybe a new agreement from a few days ago between Julani, the president of Syria, also to fight Hezbollah, may produce something. But it is needed to be clear that Israel cannot agree to a continuation of Hezbollah in any part of Lebanon holding these weapons. In one sentence, in a meeting of the Lebanese army, the head of the army said that the solution is political. So please operate.
And I do want to ask about the situation inside of Lebanon. You gave us a little bit of an important history lesson there, but how popular today is Hezbollah inside of Lebanon, having dragged the country into this war?
I think the final sentence of yours is the answer. It dragged Lebanon to a war that is a war for Iran. Hezbollah in Arabic is called mukawama. Mukawama is resistance in order to resist and maintain the sovereignty of the country. But they gave Lebanon as a tool to Iran, as a present. There are many voices culminating with Shiites resisting Hezbollah. And I'm saying, let's understand the structure of Lebanon. It's not only religion, but affluent families and respected family leaders. I presume there are many Shiites that are against Hezbollah, that were not enjoying 30 years of Nasrallah. Maybe they are the power inside the Shiites to resist Hezbollah and convert Shiite representation in Lebanon into something else.
And you think that's likely? And also, following up on your question, I mean, you mentioned before that, the word peace in Lebanon is something that most Lebanese don't want to hear. So, I mean, are you saying that today this French offer that's on the table for recognition of Israel, that's something that actually won't really pass in Lebanon?
I'm not saying so. I'm saying that in Lebanon, surprisingly, it's a democratic country and they have a law protecting the media. Many voices in Lebanon throughout the years said they want peace with Israel. Yes, they did. But Lebanon as a country and the Lebanese political arena are very afraid in putting it on the table and defining the situation as normality and peace. Maybe they will hold the frame of some sort of mutual living projects. And I want to tell the audience that there were 2 meetings prior to the war, civilian meetings between an Israeli representative and a Lebanese representative to promote projects, civilian projects. Something may be done, but the word peace is too big.
That's an unfortunate reality. On paper, it sounds wonderful, a potential peace agreement, but the reality, as we know, in this region is always far more complex. Dr. Barak Books, thank you so much for joining us today and for updating us on this very important issue.
May we have a quiet night and an end to all hostilities with our victory.
Amen to that. Thank you. And with that, that's a wrap for today's news. For the latest updates from Israel on all your devices, you can follow our ILTV channels and keep up with us on social media on all our platforms. Stay informed with the latest news straight from the heart of Israel. That's been our 5 o'clock update. I'm Lidar Lazi. Be well. Don't forget to watch our ILTV News main broadcast tonight at 8 p.m. Israel time. Thank you so much for watching and stay safe.
The signs are clearly there. The economy is in a collapsing situation. They are, in terms of their ability to fight, there's no Navy, there's no Air Force, even their ability to launch rockets in Israel and other Gulf states is diminished. So in that respect, it's clearly towards the end of the Islamic Republic.
Hello and welcome to the ILTV podcast. I'm Mayan Hoffman, executive editor of ILTV, and we are so happy to welcome back our viewers and our listeners. Now, of course, we are in the middle of a war with Iran, the U.S. and Israel against Iran, and so we've brought in an expert, author Einat Wilf, the chair of the Oz Party, the writer of the book Peace Not Now, and a strategic commentator about the region. Welcome, Einat.
Thank you.
So, Einat, for 2 weeks already, Israel and the United States have been striking inside Iran. Do you believe that we are watching what will really be the beginning of the end of this Iranian regime, or is this going to be a very long and dangerous war with perhaps not that outcome?
So the short answer is yes. The Islamic Republic is clearly on its last legs. You are right that it might take time, but even before the most recent wave of kind of fighting, someone who's actually more identified with the Islamic Republic wrote a few months ago upon visiting Iran that the feel, he described it as a late Soviet feel. So the signs are clearly there. The economy is in a collapsing situation. They are, in terms of their ability to fight, there's no Navy, there's no Air Force, even their ability to launch rockets in Israel and other Gulf states is diminished. So in that respect, it's clearly towards the end of the Islamic Republic. For me, the thing that even long before October 7th led me to believe and to even be very bullish on the end of the Islamic Republic is that I looked at it from a historical perspective. I looked at all the regimes, the countries that chose to be the main sponsors of what I've come to call Palestinianism, this ideology that prioritizes the destruction of the Jewish state. And if you look at the greatest supporters, collaborators of Palestinianism for the last century, they've been the Nazis, the Pan-Arabists, the Soviets, the Ayatollahs, the Islamic Republic. And you can see a pattern here. They all lost in cold or hot wars, and their ideology ended up being in the dustbin of history. And the Islamic Republic is going to be no exception. So yes, it is a regime on its last legs. It's behaving in that way, shooting literally in every direction, that it might be extended, that it's doing everything to last a bit longer. It might. But it is the end.
So if it is the end, then would you say in your estimation that we are winning this war?
Until the Islamic Republic falls. I mean, I think the greatest concern I have is that there will be a moment of saying, okay, we're stopping this, we're negotiating. So I'm not discounting what I find a terrible possibility, that there will be pressure to give the Islamic Republic a bit more air to breathe. And I certainly hope that no one will fall for that. So yes, I think the Islamic Republic is towards the end, but I think making it sooner rather than later should be the priority.
And in other words, there could be pressure against U.S. President Donald Trump to maybe stop fighting and give them another chance to get back to the negotiating table, despite what we heard from Witkoff and Kushner, that they came to the table saying, we're moving forward with our nuclear weapons.
Exactly. And in that sense, there's no use for negotiations because where the Islamic Republic is and where the United States is doesn't meet. I mean, there's nothing that can be negotiated that would meet between the two. So it only would be in order to get some breathing space, maybe to get Russian support, maybe to get Chinese support, maybe to revenge at kind of those who might try to bring down the Islamic Republic from within Iran. Which is why you don't want to give them that breathing space.
Makes sense. Now, for decades, Iran has really projected its power across the area through its proxies, Hezbollah, Hamas, lately, in late recent years, the Houthis. Do you think that with the fall of this regime, then we're also going to see the fall of that proxy system?
Certainly. And in that respect, I think the fall of the Islamic Republic should be thought of on par with the fall of the Soviet Union. Because the Islamic Republic, like the Soviet Union, was never just a country or a place. It was always an ideology that claims to have universal jurisdiction, that claims to be relevant everywhere, and also has universal ambitions. There's a great piece that just came out in the Free Press by Jonathan Rosen about the world that the fatwa makes, talking about the fatwa against Salman Rushdie and showing how that was also the Islamic Republic, because you see a lot of the criticisms are like, this is an attack on a sovereign state. The Islamic Republic is not a normal sovereign state that is like happy to be limited to its borders. It has universal ideological ambitions, and the fatwa against Salman Rushdie was about a world without borders, where a fatwa actually compels Muslims who choose to listen to it everywhere to violence. So in that respect, we need to think of it as an ideological battle. And we see it also on the attacks on the UAE. There's a reason that the UAE has been attacked more than Israel. And because the UAE represents the ideological mirror of the Islamic Republic. It represents what Islam could be when it seeks to be future-looking, moderate, inclusive, focused more on building for its own people than destroying what other people, especially the Jews, have built. So it's no coincidence that these are the people that are being attacked. And the Islamic Republic needs to be thought of as an ideology. And therefore, when the ideology falls, like the Soviet Union, a lot of the systems that it created to support it, like the proxies that you mentioned, also begin to fall, because the Islamic Republic, it wasn't just ideological kinship. It was money. It was military support. It was training. It was legitimacy. When all of that is taken away, when you can isolate Hezbollah in Lebanon, and we see that already happening, when you force the choice, are you Lebanese fighting for Lebanese interests, or are you fighting for Iranian interests? And what's happening in Lebanon is fascinating. Because Hezbollah was forced by the Islamic Republic to attack Israel and thereby show its hand that it's not fighting for Lebanon, right? It promised the Lebanese factions that it's a Lebanese organization for Lebanese interests, and then it showed its hand as an Iranian foreign presence. And now this is why you see so many Lebanese factions remarkably united against Hezbollah. So the more you expose the proxies as basically Iranian forces rather than local ones, the easier you make it to isolate them and ultimately to defeat them.
And certainly we could hope to see that with Hamas then as well in Gaza, which could really lead to a very different reality on our borders. Now, right in the recent, couple of weeks, our attacks have been predominantly airstrikes against Iran. We've seen the U.S. strike as well, in the naval ships, etc., but it's been basically missile strikes against targeted precision strikes. Trump was asked about putting boots on the ground, and he didn't say no. If boots were to be on the ground in Iran, what would that look like? Why would we need to put boots on the ground? Is that essential for this regime change that you say is going to come about?
My guess is that to the extent that there is any such thought, it would be special operations to remove, for example, the enriched uranium or something of the sort, not a kind of massive military invasion, more of a Venezuela extraction situation, either of people, but I think mostly of the enriched uranium. But beyond that, the real boots on the ground will be the Iranian people themselves. There has been an effort to create the notion that Israel dragged the United States into this war. And what I've been saying is that if anyone dragged the United States into this war, and that I'm saying it is a good thing, it's the Iranian people themselves. Because by coming out to the streets remarkably courageously and trying to bring down the Islamic Republic, what they demonstrated to the United States is that if the United States were to provide the envelope to bring down the power of the Islamic Republic, to kind of weaken its ability to kind of go against the people of Iran, then the people of Iran can take back their country. And I think ultimately that is the idea and that's the vision. When they came out to the streets, what they showed is that if America will do its part in bringing down kind of the power of the Islamic Republic, it is the Iranian people on the ground who will take back their country.
So let's talk then about Reza Pahlavi, who's not in the country right now, obviously.
Yes.
And, he's apparently going to be potentially this future leader. Trump definitely wants him to be the future leader, and he said he's willing to step up to the plate. Do you think that's realistic, considering he's not actually there during all of this?
I think he is only interesting and valuable, and he says so himself, as a transitional figure and maybe under a kind of constitutional monarchy. Because I know, especially in the West, you see it in Britain, but also in America, there's this trauma of Afghanistan, Iraq. No, we don't want this forever nation-building, democracy-exporting war. But the problem is just as there was no understanding of what Iraq and Afghanistan are, there seems to be, again, on the flip side, no understanding of what Iran is. Iran is a much more coherent, historical, national, kind of civilizational entity. It has a clear sense of collective self and history. Iran is as close as you come in textbooks to having the elements for successful democratic transition. A highly educated population, a strained but substantial middle class, no youth bulge. The way that the population skews older. They have, even within the Islamic Republic, even though those are very, very limited candidates, they have the experience of parliaments, of democracy. They actually have everything that can move, or elections, not democracy, that will move to successful, secular, pro-Western democracy. So it can be under a constitutional monarchy. These are the many democracies in Europe. And Reza Pahlavi can serve that symbolic role. But ultimately, it has to be the people of Iran. This is what will make it most successful, ongoing. They now chose the son of Khamenei. And I commented that if you look at the Middle East and places that do not have a monarchical dynastic tradition, whether it was in Libya with Gaddafi, in Egypt with Mubarak, in Syria with Assad, in Iraq with Saddam Hussein, whenever they tried to put in place their sons or to groom them to take over, this did not end well. Not for the fathers, not for the sons, not for the country. So for me, this shows again the Islamic Republic being on its last legs, another indication. And for the Iranian people, you don't want to have another